Chapter 2077. A ray of light flew out of the heavenly square cauldron and landed on the tombstone. It was as if the intense darkness was suddenly torn apart by the light. Something gradually appeared on the tombstone. Chu Liuyue's eyebrows moved slightly. Then the flowing cloud flying diagram and the great azure sun axe appeared. The three rays of light converged. A mysterious rune was revealed bit by bit. Chu Liyue looked at it. These runes were somewhat familiar. She seemed to have seen them on the armillary shield. In order to confirm her thoughts, she summoned the armillary shield and carefully examined it. Indeed, these runes were exactly the same as the one on the armillary shield. However, the runes engraved on the tombstone were only half of those on the armillary shield. Moreover, these runes seemed to be sealed by something. After the light of the three divine artifacts surged, only a part of them was lit up. The rest of the runes were dark and could not be seen clearly. Could it be that 5 divine artifacts were required to be here at the same time to reveal their original appearance? Chu Liyue crossed her arms and fell into deep thought. However, the reaction of the 3 divine artifacts was enough to prove that this was very likely Mr. Su's tomb. The 2 of them were buried in the same place. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. Her heart was still surging with waves. The world only knew that the 2 of them had a shocking battle back then. After the battle ended in a draw, they disappeared without a trace. Who would have thought that their tombstones were erected together? Tangke asked her to come in. Could it be related to Mr. Su? After all, she had 3 divine artifacts made by Mr. Su. Suddenly, a fluctuation appeared on the armillary shield. Then a faint glow overflowed from it and covered half of it. Chu Liyue was very familiar with this feeling. In the beginning, when she was outside and before she came in, the armillary shield had shown a similar reaction. So, it was not Tangke's summon but Mr. Su's tomb? After that, Chu Liyue subconsciously raised her hand and reached forward. Her palm gently covered the runes. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of a heartbeat came from the tombstone. Chu Liyue was shocked. This heartbeat was not hers. Just as she was about to retreat, she suddenly saw that under her palm, there was a sudden burst of light. Almost at the same time, the force in her body began to surge toward the tombstone at an astonishing speed. Not good. Chu Liyue sensed that something was amiss and immediately increased his strength. However, he was shocked to find that he could no longer withdraw his hand from the tombstone. There seemed to be something inside that was madly devouring her origin power. As for her body, it was as if it was being suppressed by an invisible force. She was unable to move. Bang bang. The sound of his heartbeat became clearer and clearer. Chu Liyue could feel the force in his body rapidly depleting. She frowned. Fortunately, she had stored an extremely shocking amount of origin power within her dantian. Otherwise, just this short consumption would have been enough to overdraft her. Ah you. Sensing that something was wrong, Dumpling also jumped out. Seeing Chu Liyue's frown, Dumpling was also very anxious. She and Chu Liyue were bound by a life contract, so she knew very well that Chu Liyue's energy was being devoured at a frightening speed. Ah you, let me help you. Dumpling was about to step forward, but Chu Liyue immediately stopped her in her tracks. Stop right there. Don't come over. The aura within the tombstone was extremely powerful. More importantly, it was clearly coming for her. Even Dumpling would not be of much help. If she was not careful, she might even implicate Dumpling. Dumpling heard this and instinctively stood rooted to the ground. However, seeing Chu Liyue's rapidly pale face, her heart also clenched. Her grape-like eyes were instantly covered by a layer of mist. Ah you, Chu Liyue took a deep breath. Zichen. As soon as she finished speaking, a black figure flashed in front of her. Zichen also responded to the summons. Chu Liyue said, "Help me look after Dumpling." Zichen nodded. Yes. After speaking, he was about to move when he saw fine beads of sweat continuously appearing on Chu Liyue's forehead. A rare hint of hesitation appeared on his cold and indifferent face. "Master, do you really not need help?" Looking at her like this really made him feel uneasy. Chu Liyue forced a smile. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." The reason why she asked Zichen and Dumpling to temporarily retreat was that even she felt that the situation was too dangerous. If something happened, the 3 of them would be directly wiped out. Therefore, after careful consideration, this was the most appropriate choice. Zichen instantly understood her thoughts. He pursed his thin lips and nodded. Zichen will not disappoint you. Master, please be careful. After speaking, he moved and came to Dumpling's side. At this moment, Dumpling was about to step forward barefooted. Before she could take 2 steps, Zichen blocked her way. Master, you mean to wait and see? Zichen lowered his head and looked at the little one in front of him. His voice was as cold as usual. Dumpling's line of sight was blocked by 2 long legs. When she heard this, she raised her head and put her hands on her waist indignantly. But now Ayu is in danger. I want to go. She snorted indignantly and changed direction. She walked around Zichen with her short legs, intending to rush over. As she walked, she muttered, I'm the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. And I've already opened my 5th meridian. I can definitely help Ayu. Even if I can't, I can call Grandpa clan leader and the others. But before she finished speaking, her body suddenly flew into the air. It was actually Zichen who had directly scooped her up. Whatever she says is the truth. Dumpling's small body was easily locked in his arms. She began to struggle with all her might. Let go of me. I want to go over. However, her small body was not worth mentioning in front of Zichen. Although her strength had increased greatly, Zichen was not to be trifled with. After all, behind Zichen stood the great Phoenix Dragon Clan's clan leader, Mao Zhen. The current Dumpling was still very young compared to her. Seeing that Dumpling was unwilling to give up, Zichen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, If you're not afraid of delaying her, go ahead. As soon as he said that, Tuanzi finally calmed down. She was just worried about Ayu. After thinking for a long time, she looked up at Zichen. Are you saying that Ayu will really be fine? Zichen raised his chin. You just have to watch for yourself. He was also her contracted magical beast, and his worries were no less than Dumpling's. But he knew that Chu Luiyue did not need their help at this time. That tombstone, from the beginning it was targeted at her. Time passed slowly. Chu Luiyue's face was pale. Her vision turned black. This was a sign of exhaustion. She closed her eyes. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2078. At this moment, the amount of energy that was being drained from her had exceeded the limit of an ordinary high god. If not for the abundant force stored in her body, she would have died from exhaustion. However, the scary thing was that this was not the end. It was as if there was a bottomless pit in the tombstone that was constantly draining her energy. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and adjusted her breathing as she pondered. What was hidden in there? Thump, 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 thump. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and opened her eyes again. Under her palm, the originally dim areas of the runes engraved on the tombstone were gradually lighting up. Obviously, it was benefiting from the fact that it was draining her energy. Chu Luiyue suddenly curled her lips and smiled helplessly. If I had known this would happen, I would have snatched the remaining divine weapons first. If all 5 of Mr. Su's divine weapons were in her hands, she would not have committed such a grave crime. But at this moment things had already come to this point, and all of this could only be said. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes. Outsiders would probably think that she was accepting Tang Ku's inheritance. Who would have thought that she was going through something like this? She finally understood that Senior Tang Ku was actually trying to lure her here. There was probably no hope for the inheritance anymore. Now she only hoped that she could get out of here in one piece. I wonder what kind of relationship Mr. Su has with him that he would go through so much trouble. Chu Luiyue mumbled to herself. Crack. Suddenly, a faint cracking sound could be heard. Chu Luiyue was stunned and immediately turned her head to look. The last dim area of the runes was finally completely covered by the lustrous light. Buzz. In an instant the light shone brightly. Chu Luiyue felt a vast and majestic aura suddenly surging out from the tombstone. It was coming straight for her. She was shocked and immediately retreated. But this time the inexplicable pressure around her finally dissipated, and she quickly retreated a distance away. Chu Luiyue did not expect that she could successfully retreat. She looked at her palm in shock. Did they split up? That tombstone. She instinctively looked up and saw that the light on the tombstone was rapidly gathering. Then it gradually condensed into a translucent figure. It was a woman who looked to be in her 20s. She wore a light green dress and had a slender figure. Her black hair casually fell to her ankles and she wore a silver-white headband inlaid with rubies. Her facial features were delicate and beautiful. When she looked over, her eyes were like spring water, warm and gentle. With a single glance, one could tell that she was an extremely gentle woman. She stepped forward, crossed her hands in front of her stomach and curtsied toward Chu Liyue. "Suli, thanks miss for saving my life." Her voice was melodious and it was sweet. Chu Liyue widened her eyes slightly. "This, Mr. Su?" she asked in disbelief. When Suli smiled, two small dimples appeared on the corners of her lips. "Suli will never forget Mrs. Kindness. It's really her." Chu Liyue looked as if she was struck by lightning. She stared blankly at the woman in front of her, but her heart was in turmoil. Suli. Mr. Su, who was rumored to be all-powerful and equally matched with Tang Ku, was actually a woman. Chu Liyue spent a lot of effort to calm the waves in her heart. She opened her mouth but did not know what to say. There were so many versions of the rumors, but none of them said that Mr. Su was a woman. All of this happened too suddenly and even Chu Liyue was dazed. She had always thought that Mr. Su was an old man or a middle-aged man with a strong physique. Anyway, he was very different from the beautiful and gentle woman in front of her. "May I know your name, miss?" Seeing that Chu Liyue did not speak, Suli thought that her sudden appearance had startled her, so she asked gently. She could not know the woman's name since she had saved her life. Chu Liyue gradually regained her rationality. "Shangguan Yu. So it's Miss Shangguan." Suli smiled and looked at the armillary shield beside Chu Liyue. Her eyes flashed with a hint of emotion. "Miss Shangguan, are you from Peach Blossom Dock?" Chu Liyue followed her gaze and looked over. It was normal for Suli to guess that since the armillary shield was here. She sorted out her thoughts and said, "Yes. It seems that Peach Blossom Dock belongs to Miss Shangguan now." Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment. "How did Mr. Su know?" Suli covered her mouth and smiled. Since the armillary shield has recognized Miss Shangguan as its owner, Peach Blossom Dock naturally belongs to Miss Shangguan. Chu Liyue had already guessed that Peach Blossom Dock was related to the armillary shield. After hearing Su Li's words, she was even more certain. The battle between Su Li and Tang Ku took place at Peach Blossom Dock. Half of the runes of the armillary shield were engraved on her tombstone. It was normal for her to know about this. Chu Liyue nodded slightly. "Mr. Su is indeed wise." Su Li smiled again. "Miss Shangguan, you are treating me as an outsider." Chu Liyue shook her head and smiled. "You are a senior and everyone calls you Mr. Su. I'm used to calling you that." Although the Su Li in front of her was gentle, generous, elegant, and calm, she wouldn't forget that half of the current 10 great sacred artifacts were created by her. Such a person was definitely worthy of being addressed as Mr. Su Li's eyes flickered as if she had fallen into a distant memory. After a long time she smiled and sighed. "Back then I disguised myself as a man and walked around the world of divine ruins, so that was why everyone misunderstood her true identity." Chu Liyue nodded. Actually, she had already guessed this. Su Li's battle with Tang Ku was already shocking enough. If everyone knew that she was a woman, it would probably cause even more shock. Su Li said with a guilty look on her face. "Speaking of which, just now, I didn't want to forcefully devour Miss Shangguan's force. I hope Miss Shangguan can forgive me." Speaking of this, Chu Liyue also had a lot of questions. "Mr. Su, you mean, was she not the one who did all this?" As if she had seen Chu Liyue's doubts, Su Li sighed softly and turned to look at the tombstone. "Miss Shangguan, do you know who erected this tombstone?" Chu Liyue hesitated for a moment. "Senior Tang Ku?" Su Li nodded and a touch of worry appeared between her eyebrows. "In fact, these 2 tombstones were erected by him. After that battle I died and my soul scattered, but he survived. It was because of his help that my soul was preserved and I slept until now." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2079. "However, this method can only preserve my soul, but it can't really revive me. Furthermore, as time passes, my soul will grow weaker and weaker. In the end, it will completely dissipate." She turned around and looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated expression. "In a few months, it will be the end of my lifespan. If it wasn't for Miss Shangguan's help today, I'm afraid." Once she said this, Chu Liyue had even more questions in her heart. "Mr. Su, why me?" She had come back to her senses. Tang Ku only had one purpose from the beginning, which was to lure her here and revive Su Li. However, she had nothing to do with Su Li and Tang Ku. There were so many people in the world, why did they choose her? She had to say, "Is it because of the 3 divine artifacts?" This was the only and biggest connection between her and Su Li. Hearing this, Su Li shook her head. Those are just superficial factors. In fact, the real reason is the armillary shield. Chu Liwei was stunned. That's right. Half of the runes on the armillary shield were engraved on the tombstone. She suddenly thought of something and looked at Tang Ku's tomb next to her. Could it be? That's right. The other half of the runes are engraved on this tombstone. Su Li said softly. For a moment Chu Liyue's mind was in a mess. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Back then Su Li and Tang Ku fought to a draw and then disappeared. In fact, it was because Su Li died and Tang Ku brought her here to be buried. He also set up a tombstone next to her. This was a sacrificial burial. Then she thought of what Su Li said just now. Tang Ku had been trying to revive her for so many years. An answer was on the verge of appearing. Tang Ku clearly loved Su Li deeply. If not, he would never set up a tombstone for her and Su Li. He was not dead yet, but he had already planned to be buried together with her after he died. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. Everyone knew that Tang Ku was a genius who was aloof. He never married and had children in his life. Everyone thought that for someone like him, the only thought in his heart was to refine artifacts. How could he care about the love of the mortal world? Who would have thought that he would go to such an extent for Su Li? Senior Tang Ku, he treated you, Chu Liyue said hesitantly. The two of you have already, no? Su Li blushed slightly. The battle at Peach Blossom Cove was indeed the first time the two of us met. I come from a humble background and I don't have much talent in martial arts. Therefore I have been abandoned by my family since I was young. Later on, by chance, I discovered that I had a pretty good talent in refining artifacts. Later on, I left my family and followed my master to cultivate. Master is a weapon refining venerable, but he has always been living in seclusion and I have always followed him. It was only after I broke through to become a weapon refining venerable and my master passed away that I started to roam the divine ruins world. Chu Liyue understood. I see. This also explained why the world had never heard of her name. She had indeed been cultivating in peace all this time. At that time I was young and ignorant. I heard that Tang Ku was very famous and was the #1 artificer in the world. Therefore I sent a letter of challenge. Su Li was still emotional when she mentioned the past. Who would have thought that so many things would happen at Peach Blossom Cove? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2080. She paused and did not continue. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed at her tombstone. When Tang Ku erected these two tombstones, he deliberately left a mechanism on them. If someone comes here, the mechanism will automatically activate and forcibly deprive him of his strength. In other words, no matter who comes here, it will be the same. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. If that was the case, it was too domineering. It would be fine if she was the one who came here today. But if it were someone else, he or she would not be so lucky to escape. Su Li nodded and comforted her. But don't worry. Although I didn't know about the mechanism before, you should be the only one who has come here all these years. Chu Liyue heaved a sigh of relief at first, but then her expression became a little strange. Why did it sound like Tang Ku had been waiting for her here since early in the morning? Su Li sighed and continued to speak. He must have known that the armillary shield has recognized you as its owner, so he let you in. In fact, Chu Liyue thought so too. So, only the owner of the armillary shield can help you? You can say that. Su Li smiled bitterly. After all, it was the armillary shield that caused my death and his serious injuries. Chu Liyue was shocked. Didn't you two compete in weapon refining at the Peach Blossom Dock? What does this have to do with the armillary shield? Su Li paused, looked up and stared at Chu Liyue. Miss Shangguan, you don't know. Tang Ku and I were only weapon refining venerables at that time. The reason why we could break through the shackles and refine 5 divine weapons is actually related to the armillary shield. At that time, the armillary shield suddenly appeared in the world. We both knew that it was extraordinary and fought fiercely for it. During the process, the power of the armillary shield dissipated, causing chaos in the Peach Blossom Dock. The divine weapons that we refined at that time were further refined and became divine weapons by chance. Chu Liyue's pupils suddenly shrank. Su Li's words were indeed a shocking secret. You mean, the reason why you and Senior Tang Ku were able to refine the 10 great sacred weapons was actually because of the power of the armillary shield. A small dimple appeared on Su Li's lips and she sighed softly. I don't know how much energy and mental energy is needed to refine a saint artifact. What's more, we were only venerables at that time. Even if we had heaven-defying abilities, how could we each refine 5 items at the same time? Chaotic stone forest. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. However, there was still no movement from the entrance. Everything looked exactly the same as it did in the beginning. There were no changes at all. Some people gradually became impatient. It's been so long. Why haven't they come out yet? TSK. That was the inheritance of the venerable artificer. How could he possibly use half a month's time? If you can't wait any longer, you can leave now. Why complain? I just thought it was a little strange, that's all. There's no other meaning. It's fine if Xianxia hasn't come out, but why hasn't there been any movement from Rongxiu either? He doesn't need such a long time to inherit Tangku's inheritance, right? That's hard to say. Don't forget that the Thousand Peaks halberd has already recognized him as its master. That's a saint artifact that Tangku personally refined. Even if it's just for the sake of this thing, Tangku will still favor him a little, right? Maybe he's waiting for Xianxia inside. All kinds of discussions were heard one after another. After a long time, it was inevitable that people would have all kinds of guesses in their hearts. Shengguanjing listened at the side. He stroked his beard and looked at the closed door thoughtfully. In fact, he wasn't worried about their safety. He was just curious about their progress inside. If could really inherit Tangku's inheritance, he would have another trump card in the future. At this moment, a sharp whistle came from the sky. Everyone looked up, but they didn't see anything. However, Wei Zhe, who had been staying in a remote corner, suddenly stood up. He raised his head to take a look and furrowed his brows. The family Wei's people were here. Wei Zhe hesitated for a moment and walked outside. Family Wei's people follow me. His followers hurriedly followed after hearing this. Many people looked over when they heard the commotion. It seemed that Wei Zhe was planning to leave. Family Wei's leader, you're leaving just like that? Someone raised his voice and asked. They haven't come out yet. Wei Zhe stopped in his tracks. That whistle is used by my family Wei to transmit messages. I have to go out and take a look. Only then did everyone understand. It seemed that the matter was not small. Otherwise, Wei Zhe wouldn't have chosen to leave so decisively. In the previous competition, he came in second place and almost won Tangku's inheritance. Was he convinced? No one could tell. Everyone thought that he would insist on staying here until the two of them came out. However, since the family Wei had something to deal with, others naturally couldn't say much. Wei Zhe continued to leave with his followers. Perhaps because Tangku had already chosen the inheritor, Wei Zhe and the others didn't encounter any accidents when they left this time. They were unimpeded all the way. Soon their figures disappeared behind many stones. Most people quickly looked away. Only Shengguanjing stared in the direction Wei Zhe left for a long time. The person next to him asked curiously, Shengguan, what are you looking at? Shengguanjing said, nothing. I just feel that Wei Zhe left a little suddenly. Didn't he say that it was because the family Wei's people came to invite him? After all, the stone forest is the family Wei's territory and he has been here for a long time. Maybe there really is something that he needs to go back to deal with in person? Shengguanjing didn't say anything. He still felt that something was wrong. Wei Zhe came to the stone forest this time for Tangku's tomb. It was impossible for the Wei clan to be unaware of this. Since that was the case, Wei Zhe should have made sufficient arrangements and preparations. What urgent matter could be more important than Tangku's tomb? The family Wei's people came just like that. Did they not think that Wei Zhe might be inheriting Tangku's inheritance at this time? Unless they knew that Wei Zhe didn't have anything important to do at this moment. Although Wei Zhe had been staying here ever since he came out, no one could guarantee that he hadn't contacted the outside world. And when he left just now, there was even a hint of urgency and haste in his movements. Shengguanjing pondered for a long time but couldn't come up with an answer. In the end, he suppressed this suspicion. On the other side, Wei Zhe walked out of the stone forest smoothly. When he took the last step, he looked back. It was quiet in the stone forest. No one could imagine what had happened inside during this period of time. Master. An old man was already waiting outside. When he saw him come out, he immediately stepped forward. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2081. Patriarch, is everything all right? Wei Qihan asked with concern as he quickly sized up Wei Zhe. When he saw that Wei Zai's aura was a little weak, he immediately became nervous. It seemed that things didn't go as smoothly as expected. Wei Zai frowned. Tang Ke's inheritance was snatched by Shangguanyu. Wei Qihan's heart sank. Shangguanyu? The one from Peach Blossom Dock? This name had been too famous recently, and it was hard not to know. How is that possible? Don't you have Senior Tang Ke's 10,000 Peaks halberd? Also you have... Wei Zai's expression suddenly turned cold as he gave him a warning look. Wei Qihan immediately shut up. Wei Zai's expression softened a little before he said, 10,000 Peaks halberd has acknowledged Zhou Xian as its master. As for the rest, I can't explain it in a few words. Anyway, the outcome has been decided and it's useless to say anything. Wei Qihan was shocked and confused, but seeing that Wei Zai didn't seem to want to talk about it, he wisely didn't continue asking. Well, as long as you're safe. Wei Zai walked forward. How's the situation in the clan? Patriarch, don't worry. After I received your message, I came here alone without anyone noticing. Wei Zai nodded in satisfaction. It's good. Hearing the conversation between the two, the people behind Wei Zai were all shocked and looked at each other in dismay. Did the Patriarch inform Elder Wei Qihan first before coming out? Wei Qihan glanced at them. Patriarch, these people, hearing this, a strong sense of uneasiness surged in their hearts. Patriarch, Wei Zai didn't stop walking. He didn't even turn his head. His voice was cold and indifferent. Clean them up and say that they died in the stone forest. Yes. Wei Qihan immediately accepted the order and waved his sleeve. Before those people could beg for mercy, their throats were all slit. Blood splattered everywhere. Soon all of them fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Wei Qihan took out a small jade bottle and poured out some transparent and odorless liquid. The corpses quickly turned into puddles of water and evaporated, leaving no trace behind. His series of actions flowed smoothly like water. Clearly, this was not the first time he had done it. After he was done, he quickly stepped forward and caught up with Wei Zai. The two figures quickly disappeared. Half an hour later, the two of them arrived at a mountain peak 100 miles away from the stone forest. Wei Zai was familiar with the route and headed straight for the cave halfway up the mountain. Wei Qihan, on the other hand, concealed himself and was responsible for guarding outside the cave. Wei Zai headed deeper into the cave. The deeper they went, the darker it became. However, Wei Zai seemed to have been here many times. He did not slow down at all as he rushed straight into the cave. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The sound of water dripping could be faintly heard. When Wei Zai heard this voice, he was delighted and immediately sped up. After turning a corner, a faint glow appeared. A small pool appeared in front of him. That ray of light came from a stalactite above the pool. Water continued to drip down from the top, finally dripping into the pool. Wei Zai heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly stepped forward, took out the purplish-black hammer and placed it in the center of the pool. Tick-tock. A drop of water happened to fall on the hammer. The patterns on it gradually became clearer. Wei Zai immediately felt the depleted energy in his body being replenished. Thank goodness. Thank goodness he made it back in time. Shiping, are you all right? Wei Zai asked anxiously. A moment later, a young man's voice came from the purplish-black hammer. Father, don't worry. I'm fine. If Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue were here, they would definitely recognize Wei Shiping's voice. When Wei Zai heard this, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, when he thought of everything that had happened, he still could not completely relax. It's all my fault for being useless. I almost let you. It's not your fault. Wei Shiping's voice sounded a little weak, with a hint of gloominess and viciousness. It's all because those two are too cunning and treacherous. Otherwise, he and his father would have been the ones to inherit Tang Ke's legacy. Now all of their carefully planned plans had been completely destroyed. When he mentioned this, Wei Zai was filled with resentment. Those two are too cunning. Shiping, you should stay here and recuperate for now. I have a feeling that Rong Xiao seems to have discovered something. You can use this time to recuperate. Father, don't worry. I know what you're saying. Although I didn't succeed this time, at least I've absorbed a lot of Tianlei's energy. It won't be long before my strength reaches a new level. Only then did Wei Zai truly feel at ease. Good. During this time I'll stay here and watch over you. When Shangguanyu and the others come out of the stone forest, we can plan our revenge. The departure of Wei Zai and the others did not affect the others. After they left, the stone forest quickly returned to its previous state. Everyone began to wait again. This kind of time was always long and torturous. However, they were really curious about Chu Liyue's situation, so they had no choice but to continue. After Su Li finished speaking, Chu Liyue was silent for a long time. She did not expect such a shocking secret to be hidden behind the 10 great sage artifacts. If these sage artifacts were all refined with the power of the celestial shield, then what about the celestial shield? What kind of existence was it? Su Li's hand slowly swept across the tombstone. The runes engraved on it were uneven and rough. Although we've all refined 5 sage artifacts, we've also paid a great price for it. My physical body has fallen and my soul is on the verge of death. Although Tangku's condition is better than mine, erecting these 2 tombstones exhausted almost all of his energy. Chu Liyue pondered for a long time and finally asked, "Why did Senior Tangku divide the runes on the celestial shield into 2 and engrave them on these 2 tombstones?" Su Li looked back. This is the only way to wait until the day the celestial shield recognizes its master. She pointed at the 3 sage artifacts. Back then, the power in the celestial shield was divided into 2 by the 2 of us and then injected into the sage artifacts. If you want to completely awaken the celestial shield, you have to take back the power. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2082. Awaken the celestial shield? Chu Liyue was a little surprised. In her opinion, the celestial shield had already awakened when it caused the mountain fire in the Peach Blossom Dock. Moreover, it had already recognized her as its master. Why did it still need to be awakened now? As if sensing her doubts, Su Li shook her head with a smile and explained. You are indeed the master of the celestial shield, but it's not in its original state. I can't describe with words how powerful the celestial shield is when it's fully unleashed. However, if you want to become stronger, this is the step you have to take. She looked extremely serious. Chu Liyue paused and asked, if that's the case, what will happen to these divine artifacts in the end? Once the power is extracted, then, wouldn't it become a pile of scrap metal again? You don't have to worry about this. Although the celestial shield's power is stored in these divine artifacts, awakening the celestial shield doesn't need to extract the power. All you need to do is to gather them. When 10 divine artifacts are gathered, the celestial shield will naturally awaken completely. Chu Liyue then felt more at ease. She didn't know about the other divine artifacts, but the ones she had now were extremely precious and powerful. She really couldn't bear to destroy it. So what I need to do is to gather 10 divine artifacts. Su Li nodded. Chu Liyue rubbed her temples as she felt a headache coming on. Then you think too highly of me. It was easy to say, but it was very troublesome to do. After spending so much time and effort, she had only managed to obtain 3 of them. Excluding the Thousand Peaks halberd of the Rongxiu, there were still 6 divine artifacts. Where could she find them? If she guessed correctly, the remaining divine artifacts were now scattered among the major families and clans in the Divine Ruins world. Those were the treasures of their clans. How could she snatch them? Even if she was now the Peach Blossom Dock's lord, it was still as difficult as ascending to heaven. Su Li's lips curved into a smile. Lady Shangguan, this might be extremely difficult for others, but for you, it is indeed something you can do. Don't forget that the celestial shield is now in your hands. Chu Liyue's mind flickered. Mr. Su, you mean, the 10 great sacred artifacts only broke through their shackles and became sacred artifacts with the help of the celestial globe shield's power. If the Armillary Heaven Shield summons them, they will naturally come. Chu Liyue's eyelids twitched violently. Mr. Su, are you asking me to rob you? Su Li blinked her eyes and smiled. Her dimples were shallow and she said gently, I'm sorry. How can you say that it's a robbery? In this world, the strong were respected. Whoever had the ability would win. Besides, even the Armillary Heaven Shield now belongs to you, Miss Shangguan, so why worry about those saint artifacts? That was yours in the first place. Outside the bronze door, Rongxiu stood with his hands behind his back. Tangku knelt not far behind him. Silence reigned in the vast space. Only the countless Tianlei in the sky were still rotating leisurely. The radiance was resplendent and dazzling. At a certain moment, Rongxiu's brows twitched and he turned around. Tangku immediately tensed up. Your Highness. Rongxiu looked at him indifferently. Get up. Tangku was stunned at first, But then he suddenly realized something and his eyes were overflowing with excitement. Your Highness, you mean, it was done. It seemed that it was done inside. Because Xiu was here, he did not dare to secretly investigate the situation inside. At this moment his heart was finally at ease. I dare not forget Master Yu's kindness. When Master Yu comes out safely, I will give you all my wealth. What he was talking about was the endless sea of thunder that had accumulated for tens of thousands of years. Xiu raised his brows slightly and said calmly, she won't be interested in your little things. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2083. But, Su Li said hesitantly. Summoning the 10 great sacred artifacts and awakening the armillary shield is still a little difficult for Miss Shangguan now. To be safe, Miss Shangguan should wait until you become a weapon refining venerable before making a decision. Chu Luyue nodded. She understood what Su Li meant. Summoning the 10 great sacred artifacts was definitely not an easy task. Even if she was the owner of the armillary shield now, it was still difficult to do it. It was already difficult for her to deal with 3 sacred artifacts at the same time, let alone 10. In addition, once the armillary shield is awakened, its power is amazing. Although Miss Shangguan is powerful and has tempered her divine body with the god-destroying tribulation, if you can use it in the god realm, your success rate will increase a lot. Su Li said seriously, and Chu Liwei also listened carefully. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Su. I will remember it in my heart. Chu Liyue's hand slowly brushed across the armillary shield. Although she also wanted to see the true power of the armillary shield, now was obviously not the right time. Before that, she had to improve her strength first. Feeling the uneven secret text under her finger, Chu Liwei asked curiously. I have one more thing to ask. Mr. Su, do you recognize the secret text on this? Su Li shook her head. Chu Liyue's heart sank slightly. In fact, she had already guessed this when she heard Su Li talk about the things that happened in the past. It was just that she was unwilling to give up and had to ask clearly. Originally, she thought that she could get some clues from Tang Ku. However, to be able to see Su Li and learn about the secrets of the armillary shield, this trip was not in vain. The so-called inheritance of Tang Ku did not exist. The secret to becoming a weapon-refining saint was the armillary shield and the 10 great sacred artifacts. For Su Li, Tang Ku really put in a lot of effort and did not hesitate to wait for 10,000 years. Although she was tricked into entering after knowing the cause and effect, she could not be angry no matter what. She could only sigh endlessly. Chu Liyue's mind calmed down. Since you have woken up now, how about, you go out with me? Su Li heard this and was slightly stunned. Go out? Yeah. Chu Liyue looked around. Although this place was full of energy, it was too lonely. As far as the eye could see, one would only feel a deep sense of loneliness. He really did not know how Tang Ku had endured for such a long time. She smiled at Su Li. If Senior Tang Ku sees you again, he will definitely be very happy. At the mention of Tang Ku, Su Li's expression wavered. In fact, that battle back then was the first time the two of them had met, and it was also the only time. After that, her physical body was destroyed and her soul scattered. If it wasn't for Tang Ku, she would have died long ago. Even she didn't know why Tang Ku would do this for her. Su Li bit her lips and hesitated. She still hadn't figured out how to face Tang Ku. Chu Liyue looked at her. He didn't need to ask to know what Su Li was thinking. Although she was once the all-powerful Mr. Su, she was also a woman who knew nothing about love. She had spent most of her time and energy on cultivation. Originally, she had only issued a challenge to Tang Ku out of curiosity and competitiveness. Who knew that after the battle at Peach Blossom Dock? Su Li suddenly asked. Miss Shangguan, why do you think he did this? We've only met once and fought once. She knew how much Tang Ku had done for her, but it was also because of this that she was even more perturbed and confused. For a moment she didn't know what to do. Chu Liyue looked down and seemed to be thinking. After a while she looked up at the 2 tombstones side by side and smiled. There seemed to be stars shining in her eyes. Love is the most unreasonable thing in the world. Outside the bronze gate. After confirming that Su Li had woken up, Tang Ku became anxious and looked in the direction of the gate from time to time. Xiu glanced at him. You have waited for 10,000 years. What's the difference in a little while? No matter what, he had to wait for you to rest. Tang Ku's face was a little embarrassed, but there was still unconcealable joy in his eyes. I'm just too happy. although he had been thinking about this day for a long time. But when all this really happened, he felt that it was too unreal in his heart and he couldn't believe it. Xiao paused and said, "Have you ever thought that after doing so much, you might not be able to keep her in the end?" Tang Ku was stunned. After a moment of silence, he said, "As long as she can be safe, I have no other request." Xiao's thin scarlet lips slightly raised, revealing a very faint smile. Tang Ku was a little puzzled. "Your Highness, why are you smiling?" Xiao was about to speak, but suddenly he turned back and looked at the bronze gate. Almost at the same time, Tang Ku suddenly realized something and she looked up and fixed her eyes on it. Creak. The bronze gate that was closed tightly slowly opened. Two figures, one in front and one behind, walked out. The one in front was Chu Liyue, and the translucent figure behind was undoubtedly Su Li. Chu Liyue walked out and saw Xiao standing not far from the gate. Her lips curved up and she was about to say something when she suddenly saw a figure standing behind Xiao. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s, handsome and tall. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment before she realized that this person was Tang Ku. Hearing his voice, Chu Liyue thought that he should be quite old, but who knew that he was so young? Did he know that Su Li had woken up so he came out? "Senior Tang Ku." Chu Liyue shook her head helplessly and smiled. "You're finally willing to come out?" Tang Ku's gaze fell on Su Li and for a moment he was in a daze. Her appearance was exactly the same as when he first saw her and there was no change at all. At this moment he even felt that everything had happened yesterday. The long years in between were just a dream. Su Li's heart skipped a beat, but she was the first to react. "Tang Ku. Long time no see." Tang Ku suddenly came back to his senses, suppressed the waves in his heart and slowly smiled. "Long time no see." Chu Liyue's eyes swept back and forth between the two of them and said with a smile, "The two of you have been separated for a long time and now that you finally meet, you should have a lot to say. We won't disturb you for now." As she spoke, she walked to Xiao's side, gently nudged him with her elbow and asked in a low voice, "When did Senior Tang Ku come out?" Xiao held her hand and pulled her in front of him. He looked around carefully for a while and only when he was sure that she was all right did he relax. Hearing Chu Liyue's question, he thought for a moment. "About an hour ago." Chu Liyue calculated in her heart. That was about the time Su Li woke up. It seemed that Tang Ku should know the situation inside. She blinked and asked again, "Then, did Senior Tang Ku make things difficult for you?" Xiao's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly and he smiled casually. "That's not it." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2084. Creak. The door, which had been quiet for a long time, finally made a sound. Jing and the others who were waiting outside immediately perked up and looked over. The door slowly opened and a tall figure walked out. It was Xiao. Behind him, Chu Liyue's figure also entered the crowd's eyes. Jing was delighted. He quickly stepped forward and looked at the two of them seriously. "How are you?" Chu Liyue smiled and said, "Taizu, don't worry. Everything is going well." The atmosphere in the surroundings suddenly became subtle. Many people secretly exchanged glances. Does this mean that she has successfully obtained Tang Ku's inheritance? After all, she had won that competition. Tang Ku had also shown that he admired her very much. It was reasonable for him to teach her everything. This also meant that in the future she was very likely to break through to become a refining saint. With Jing, this family was probably invincible. Jing was also excited. That's good. That's good. He knew that you would definitely be able to do it." After a moment, someone in the crowd finally asked boldly, "May I ask Holy Son and Master Yu, how is Senior Tang Ku now?" They had come out. Then what about Tang Ku? He still had a strand of his soul left behind. Chu Liyue looked at the person who asked and smiled calmly. Senior Tang Ku said that he was already used to staying here. Now that everything is over, he will completely seal this place and never come out again. When everyone heard this, they were first surprised, then regretful. In that case, wouldn't they have no chance to come and ask for advice in the future? Xiao glanced at everyone and narrowed his eyes. Family Wei is not here? Hearing what he said, Chu Liyue realized that Wei Zhe was indeed not here. That was strange. With Wei Zhe's temperament and style, he didn't seem to leave before they came out, right? Jing explained, 3 days ago, Family Wei's people came and said that there was an urgent matter that he needed to deal with personally. So he left with his people. Rongxiu smiled. I see. It seems like the head of the Family Wei is really busy. Chu Liyue's thoughts turned and the corners of his lips curved slightly. I originally planned to bid farewell to the head of the Family Wei, but now it seems that I shouldn't disturb you. Since that's the case, we'll leave first. If fate wills it in the future, we'll naturally meet again. He was about to leave. Many people felt empty inside when they heard this. Everyone had come here with high hopes. Now that they didn't get anything, they naturally felt that it was a pity. But if he wanted to leave, they couldn't stop him. Moreover, after this incident, Chu Liyue, who had obtained Tang Ke's inheritance, would definitely have a bright future. Building a good relationship was much better than making enemies. Immediately, many people bid farewell to them in an amiable manner, speaking and behaving very politely. Chu Liyue accepted it all and also took his leave with a chuckle. After some tossing and turning, the group finally left. Only when their figures had completely disappeared did the rest of the crowd gradually disperse. Family. In the study, Jun Jiuqing sat behind the table looking at something. A figure hurried over. It was Yiwenzhua. He went straight to the door and waved his hand at the two guards who were about to salute. You can leave first. This old man has something to say to the 9 ministers. The two guards looked at each other. Without the orders of the head of the family, they didn't dare to leave without permission. Even if this person was Yiwenzhua. At this moment, Jun Jiuqing's voice came from the room. You can leave first. Hearing this, the two immediately heaved a sigh of relief, respectfully responded and left. Yiwenzhua walked in and locked the door. After making sure that no one else was here, he looked at Jun Jiuqing, who was sitting in the room. A crack appeared on the calm expression on his face, as if he was trying to hold back something. Jun Jiuqing looked up and smiled. Master, why are you here at this time? Yiwenzhua walked in front of him without saying a word and looked at him with a complicated gaze. His gaze was suspicious and scrutinizing. After a long while, he asked in a deep voice. Big brother's death has something to do with you? This big brother was of course Yiwentao. The smile on Jun Jiuqing's face faded a little and he asked in surprise. Why do you say that, master? I heard that before he died that day, the only person he saw was you. Yiwenzhua stared at him, his fists clenched in his sleeves. 9 ministers, do you dare say that this matter has nothing to do with you? Jun Jiuqing paused and said, That's right, I did go to see the head of the family that day. Because the subordinates kept saying that he was unwilling to use medicine, I wanted to persuade him. Unfortunately, the head of the family had lost his cultivation and no longer had the will to continue living. He chose to self-destruct because he couldn't accept the fact that he had become a cripple. This kind of life made him despair and he would rather die. Master, a person like the head of the family has been proud his whole life. It's normal for him to make such a choice, isn't it? Jun Jiuqing's tone was calm, but his words were sharp and incisive. Yiwenzhua frowned. He had to admit that what he said was indeed very reasonable. But he still felt that something was wrong. Yiwenzhua stared at Jun Jiuqing as if trying to find some clues from his face. But he couldn't find anything. Yiwenzhua suddenly realized that he couldn't see through him at all. He took a deep breath and finally asked in a deep voice. Even so, then, what do you say about the Family Wei? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2085. Family Wei. What about them? Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he did not understand the meaning of his words. Yiwenzhua snorted coldly and lowered his voice. You've been in contact with Wei Zhe for a long time, haven't you? Jun Jiuqing smiled and there was a hint of devilishness in his eyes. Master, Family E and Family Wei have always been in contact. Now that I'm the head of the family, isn't it normal for me to be in contact with Wei Zhe? You clearly know that's not what I mean. Yiwenzhua took a deep breath. Others may not know, but I do. That 10,000 Peaks halberd clearly belongs to Family E. There are no more than 3 people in the entire Divine Ruins who know about this. But now, the 10,000 Peaks halberd has appeared in Wei Zhe's hands out of the blue. Other than you, who else can quietly take away the 10,000 Peaks halberd? If anyone else was here and heard this, they would definitely be greatly shocked. Everyone thought that Family E only had one sacred artifact, which was Yiwentao's great azure sun axe. But in reality, the 10,000 Peaks halberd had belonged to them thousands of years ago. It was just that Yi Wentao had always kept a low profile when it came to such matters, so he deliberately concealed the existence of the 10,000 Peaks halberd. Yi Wenzhua only knew about it because he was Yi Wentao's younger brother. Recently, the matter of Tang Ke's tomb in the rocky forest had caused a great uproar, and news of the 10,000 Peaks halberd had already spread. In the rocky forest, in order to try to open Tang Ke's tomb, Wei Zhe had taken out the 10,000 Peaks halberd. Unfortunately, it had not succeeded, and in the end the 10,000 Peaks halberd had recognized Rong Xiu as its master. The latter was the most important point. Now the 10,000 Peaks halberd has fallen into Rong Xiu's hands and has become his. Are you satisfied? But they didn't even have the right to make a fuss. This time they had really suffered a loss. Jun Jiuqing's expression became much calmer. To tell you the truth, the 10,000 Peaks halberd was lent to Wei Zhe temporarily. But at that time he only said that he wanted to borrow a sacred weapon forged by Tang Ke back then to open Tang Ke's tomb and that he would return it after using it. I didn't expect the things that happened after that. You actually lent out such an important thing so easily? Yi Wentao asked in disbelief. Something seemed to be surging wildly in his chest. The Sun Great Axe has already been taken by Shangguanyu. Now even the Myriad Peaks halberd has become Rong Xiu's. Jiuqing, what are you thinking? Jun Jiuqing looked at him calmly. Master, allow me to remind you that it's a sacred weapon. Sacred artifacts had spirits, and they had always chosen their own masters. Without this opportunity, even if one guarded it for thousands of years, they still wouldn't be able to obtain its recognition. On the other hand, some people were destined to become its master. This was something that could not be stopped. Although he didn't like Rong Xiu, this kind of thing couldn't be changed by force. Yi Wentao was speechless. He frowned and looked at Jun Jiuqing with a complicated expression. He suddenly realized that he didn't seem to understand him at all. At this moment, Jun Jiuqing's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were deep. Even though Yi Wentao had been his master for many years, he didn't know what he was thinking at this moment. Yi Wentao was suddenly at a loss. Did Jun Jiuqing become like this after becoming the head of family Yi, or was he always like this? You deliberately gave the Myriad Peaks halberd to Wei Zhe. He said slowly and firmly. You and Wei Zhe worked together to spread the news about Tang Ke's tomb, right? Jun Jiuqing didn't say anything. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. What are you trying to do? You're already the head of family Yi. But he didn't realize it before, but now he realized that Jun Jiuqing's actions seemed to be premeditated. Master, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Jun Jiuqing said and stood up. Family Yi's vitality has been greatly damaged and it's time for them to rest. There are many things that they need your help with. You must take care of yourself. Yi Wentao suddenly felt a chill slowly rising from the soles of his feet. Chu Luyue and the others successfully left the stone forest and returned to Peach Blossom Cove. It had been nearly 2 months since the day they left. To Chu Luyue's joy, Shangguanyu and Chu Ning had both come. Shangguanyu had already broken through to the high god level, and Chu Ning had also broken through to the 9th stage in a short period of time. He was only 1 step away from the high god level. One had to know that he had started cultivating from the 1st stage. This speed was already heaven-defying. Moreover, he had the indestructible divine body. Even if he hadn't broken through to the high god level yet, he still had extremely strong combat power. The news in the stone forest had spread. Everyone knew that Chu Luyue had obtained Tang Ke's inheritance and was very likely to become the next weapon refining saint in the future. The entire Peach Blossom Cove was jubilant. However, Shangguanyu didn't stay for too long. After seeing Chu Luyue, he only stayed for a few days before leaving. After all, he still needed someone to look after the Tianling dynasty. Although Chu Luyue was reluctant, he still sent someone to send him back. Now that she was the master of Peach Blossom Cove, many things were much more convenient. She didn't have to worry about going in and out of the Divine Ruins world. She could return at any time, and Shangguanyu could also come over at any time. Chu Ning stayed behind and focused on his cultivation. Now Chu Liyue was his only family and the person he cared about the most. There was no point in returning to Yaochen. It was better to stay and use the cultivation environment of Peach Blossom Cove to improve his strength. Everything was gradually on the right track. On this day, Chu Liyue came to Qingshui Cliff. He was accompanied by Sanson. Sanson followed behind. As he walked, he said, "Master, if you need any medicinal herbs, just let me know." There's no need for you to come here personally, right? Look at how busy you are every day. Chu Luiyue waved her hand. I'm not sure what I need, so I came to take a look first. Sanson scratched his head. Then what do you want to do, master? Why don't you tell me? Maybe I can help you? Chu Luiyue laughed and looked back at him, her eyes full of suspicion. Sanson coughed and straightened his back. Yes, of course. Don't think that I'm not very talented in celestial physician. Recently, I've read a lot of ancient books and studied a lot of secret recipes. It was rare for Sanson to be so diligent. Chu Luiyue knew without asking that he was definitely trying to open up new markets. She chuckled. You really can't help me with this. Sanson was a little unconvinced. You can't look down on me like this. If you tell me, maybe I can really help. Chu Luiyue stood still and raised her chin. Open. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2086. Even Shengguan Jing, Nan Suhuai and the others were surprised. They knew very well that Chu Luiyue didn't have a divine body before. Now this must have been cultivated during this period of time. What kind of divine body is that? Brother Shengguan, why do I feel that it's different from yours? Zhao Song asked curiously. Since Chu Luiyue was Shengguan Jing's descendant and had his bloodline, they thought that she should have cultivated the same divine body. Shengguan Jing shook his head. I don't know when you cultivated the divine body. Besides, she's very talented. Maybe she chose the most suitable divine body for herself. Zhao Song nodded thoughtfully. This statement was not without reason. Every cultivator's physique and talent were different. Even people from the same family would sometimes choose different divine bodies to cultivate. Shengguan Jing looked at Chu Luiyue's divine body carefully for a while, but he still couldn't recognize it. He turned to Nan Suhuai and asked in a low voice, Dean Nan, do you recognize Yuer's divine body? Even though he had seen a lot, he still couldn't recognize it. Although Nan Suhuai's seniority was lower than his as the dean of Lingxiao College, he had countless precious ancient books and should know more than him. Besides, Yuer was a student of Lingxiao College. If she cultivated the divine body, she should have learned it from there. To his surprise, Nan Suhuai shook his head. I don't know either. After pausing for a while, Nan Suhuai saw that Shengguan Jing and the others were a little surprised. Then he said, Actually, Senior Shengguan, when Yuer was in the college, she read a lot of related books and tried to cultivate it many times. There were many top divine bodies, but she couldn't succeed. So, I'm relieved to see that she has successfully cultivated her own divine body. But I don't know the origin of this divine body. Since Nan Suhuai said so, it must be true. Suddenly Rong Xiu's cold and deep voice sounded. Just went through the God-destroying tribulation some time ago. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a dead silence. God-destroying tribulation. Shengguan Jing suddenly thought of something and gasped. You mean? Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curved slightly and he nodded gently. Her god body was refined by the god-destroying tribulation. Whoosh. Chu Luiyue tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and his body instantly shot out like an arrow. He drew a straight red line in the air and went straight for Yi Wentao. The two of them faced each other, and the distance between them was rapidly shrinking. Compared to Yi Wentao's exceptionally tall and sturdy omnidirectional divine body, Chu Luiyue's figure seemed exceptionally small. It was as if Yi Wentao could easily kill her with a single strike. In fact, Yi Wentao thought the same. When he saw Chu Luiyue summon the godly body, he was a little surprised, but it was only for a moment. She was an exalted god, and it was normal for her to have a godly body. There was nothing to be surprised about. Although Yi Wentao could not tell what godly body she cultivated at first glance, there were hundreds and thousands of ways to cultivate godly bodies in this world. He could not possibly know all of them. Even if he could not tell, it did not matter. He did not need to pay attention to it at all. Because his omnidirectional divine body was the top existence among all godly bodies. It was also because of this unique and powerful godly body that he had always been the head of the family all these years. Now Chu Luiyue was planning to fight him head-on with her godly body. It seemed that her brain was really muddled. Yi Wentao sneered and threw a punch. The wind from the punch suddenly arrived. The strong wind came head-on and swept up Chu Luiyue's black hair. She stared straight ahead, and the power in her body was continuously gathering in her right hand at this moment. Then she raised her arm directly and threw a punch, meeting Yi Wentao's punch. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Chu Luiyue chose to fight Yi Wentao head-on? Wouldn't she, a mere high god, lose in such a hand-to-hand fight? This punch would probably cripple her even if she did not die? Iwentao sneered. It's been so long, but her arrogance hasn't changed at all. She was like this a few years ago and she's still like this a few years later. In fact, she's becoming more and more arrogant. Jun Jiuqing stared at the field with a devilish look in his eyes, and his hands slowly clenched in his sleeves. He did not respond to Yi Wentao's words. However, the family Yi and Nan family members behind him had the same attitude as Yi Wentao. That's right. That Shangguan Yu really thinks that she's great just because she has some talent. She doesn't know that there's always someone better than her. How can the gap between a high god and a high god be so easily bridged? Even if her crimson gold celestial phoenix successfully opened its 5th meridian, I'm afraid it's too late. This time it's finally over. Chu Luiyue turned a deaf ear to the noise. Her eyes burned with a strong desire to fight, and she pressed forward with indomitable will. Bam! Their fists collided. There was a dull thud. After a short pause, the ground around the two of them began to crack rapidly. The cracks spread like a spider web. It was obvious that the collision of the two of them in this fight was terrifying. However, what shocked everyone was that Chu Luiyue did not fly out as expected. She did not even move back half an inch. Everyone was stunned. Chu Luiyue actually took the full blow of Yi Wentao's omnidirectional divine body? There was silence. Only the two of them were still fighting each other. Green and dazzling lights intertwined, and it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Dark red blood slowly seeped out of the corner of Chu Luiyue's mouth, and it made her look even paler. However, she was still standing on the same spot, facing off against Yi Wentao. At this moment, the surrounding Xian formations that had not been destroyed suddenly moved. Yi Wentao's divine body had destroyed the few Xian formations in the center and passed through them to fight with Chu Luiyue. Therefore, Yi Wentao's divine body was standing on one side of the Xian formations, while his physical body was standing on the other side. Now, these Xian formations were operating very quickly, and they connected with each other again, filling up the broken parts and forming a complete giant net, which was heading towards Yi Wentao's physical body. Yi Wentao was originally standing at the back, waiting to see Chu Luiyue get dealt with. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong, and when he looked, he realized that he was surrounded by those Xian formations again. Moreover, although there were fewer Xian formations than before, the power on them did not decrease at all. In fact, it seemed to have become stronger. Feeling the terrifying pressure, Yi Wentao's heart skipped a beat. How can this be? Chu Luiyue's origin power should be almost depleted. Chu Luiyue's gaze turned slightly, and her red lips suddenly curved into a cold arc. I forgot to say. Although I'm only a high god, the origin power in your body may not be comparable to mine. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2087. I've seen it with my own eyes. Chu Luiyue didn't say that out loud. Suli didn't look like she was faking it. She was such a powerful being that there were countless high gods and even venerables who were willing to follow her. Since she had said so, it was most likely true. But if that was the case, then what was going on with Dabeo? Chu Luiyue remembered clearly that he had rebuilt his divine body in the Red Moon Desert. And at that time, in order to save her, he had transformed into a child in a moment of desperation. Speaking of external help, at the last moment, Dabeo had used her blood. But Chu Luiyue didn't take it to heart. Judging from the reaction of Dabeo and the other two, they didn't want her help from the beginning. They were planning to rebuild their divine bodies by themselves. So much so that Chu Luiyue had always thought that everyone was like that. But after hearing Su Li's words, she realized that her understanding was wrong. You are? Su Li reached out and waved her hand in front of Chu Luiyue. What are you thinking? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and smiled. Nothing. Actually, I've heard this from others. So wrong. Then Mr. Su, is there really no one in this world who can do this? You mean to say that one can rebuild their divine body purely with their own strength? Su Li didn't see the abnormality in her expression and thought that she had misheard. She shook her head gently. I've never heard of such a thing. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes. But Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly as if she was thinking about something. Maybe someone stronger than venerables can do it. Who knows? Chu Luiyue looked up at her in surprise. Someone stronger than venerables? Yes. But such a powerful person only exists in legends. Even Tang Ku and I have never seen such a person. By the way, I heard that you're a student of Lingxiao College? Yes. Some people say that the first dean of Lingxiao College was such a person. It's just that no one has personally verified it. Later on, he mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Those rumors about him were gradually drowned out by time, and no one mentioned it anymore. Su Li shook her head regretfully. Chu Liyue's heart was in turmoil. In that case, Debao, seeing Chu Liyue fall into silence, Su Li thought that she was still worried about the matter of reconstructing her physical body, so she comforted her. You don't have to worry too much. Even if you don't succeed in the end, it doesn't matter. Even if I don't have a physical body, I'm already very satisfied with this soul. Needless to say, she could still come out and see the wind and sunlight and see all kinds of people in this world. To her, this was already extremely fortunate. Chu Liyue collected his thoughts, and the emotions in his eyes were completely restrained. She smiled. No matter what, let's try it first. Manner. In the study, Rongxia was writing something. Yuemo walked in hurriedly. Your Highness. There's news from the family Wei. Rongxia didn't stop what he was doing. Speak. Yuemo said. Some time ago, the family Wei's elder Wei Qihan did go out alone once. No one knows where he went or what he did. Rongxia's expression was calm and his voice was light. What about the family? Yuemo lowered his head. The family Yi has been in chaos for a long time. It only calmed down after Yi Wentao died. However, because Yi Wentao self-destructed and suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Madame at Peach Blossom Cove, the family Yi felt embarrassed and didn't hold a grand funeral. They only buried him in a hurry. As for the Thousand Peaks halberd, it didn't cause much of a stir. That was natural. After all, the number of family Yi who knew about the existence of the Thousand Peaks halberd could be counted on one hand. Rongxia smiled. What's there to bury when the body and soul are destroyed? It's just a formality. Jun Jiuqing's ability to make an example out of someone was getting better and better. Yuemo sighed. No matter what, Yi Wentao was once a powerful figure in the family Yi. No one in the family Yi dared to say no to him in the past 100 years. Who knew that he would end up like this after his death? The past is the past after all. Rongxia put down his pen and picked up the paper in his hand to read it again. Jun Jiuqing had worked hard to get to where he was today. Naturally, he had to seize every opportunity to gain a foothold. Yi Wentao was just a stepping stone for him. The family Yi was originally very unwilling to stand on his side. Many of them were eyeing the position of the head of the family covetously. However, all of this quietly subsided with Yi Wentao's death. Everyone could see that Jun Jiuqing was definitely involved in Yi Wentao's death. However, this was the result that Jun Jiuqing wanted. Sometimes, forceful suppression was faster and more effective than any conciliatory method. He paused. Jun Jiuqing has always been a smart person. Yuemo asked hesitantly. Your Highness, are you going to let them collude like this? Jun Jiuqing is determined to take down the family Yi. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to give away Wan Feng halberd and use the family Yi to send I away. Since that's the case, I will give him face. Although he didn't care about Wan Feng halberd, it was a good opportunity to bring Tang Ku and Su Li out and establish Yuer's prestige. Wei Zhe will contact the family Yi in the future. Just wait and see. Yuemo immediately replied, yes. At this moment, someone else walked in from outside the door. It was Yanqing. Your Highness. As soon as Yanqing walked in, he knelt down and bowed. His brows were slightly furrowed and his expression was somewhat heavy. Yuemo rarely saw such an expression and his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Could it be that something happened? Rongxia raised his chin. Just stand up and speak. Only then did Yanqing stand up. He took out a letter from his bosom and said in a deep voice, Your Highness, the Patriarch has passed away. 36 Respected Elder Ming sent a letter back and asked you to set off immediately. When Yuemo heard the first half of the sentence, he didn't realize what was going on. However, when he heard the second half, he immediately widened his eyes in shock and almost jumped up. The Patriarch has passed away? This was too sudden. Rongxia didn't look surprised. His slender fingers moved slightly, and the paper in his hand flew to Yanqing. This is the eulogy I wrote for the Patriarch. Copy it and distribute it to all the respected elders. Yuemo turned around with a shocked expression. When he came in, he saw that His Highness was writing something. However, he never expected that he was writing a eulogy for the patriarch. Your Highness. You already know? Yan Qing caught the paper and instantly understood something. He nodded respectfully. Yes. Rong Xiu tilted his head and looked out of the window. There were no clouds in the sky and the weather was good. Today's weather is good. It was a good day to send someone off. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2088. Chu Luiyue and Su Li discussed and chose some herbs, intending to try a few more times. Maybe they would succeed by a stroke of luck? After a long time the two of them walked out of the room. Sanson, who was waiting outside, hurried forward with a face full of smiles. Master Mr. Su, why did the two of you come out so quickly? Aren't you going to take a look? Chu Luiyue glanced at him. It was rare for this kid to be so generous. Don't you feel bad? What are you talking about? Sanson chuckled. Sanson's herbs are yours. You can just come and take whatever you want. Besides, if these herbs can really help Mr. Su, it's my honor, isn't it? This was the famous Mr. Su. It was rumored that he was one of the only two refining saints in the world of God. Even a venerable god would not dare to be presumptuous in front of such a person. They could not wait to suck up to him. What were these herbs? If they could build a relationship with this person, it would be a huge gain. Su Li covered her mouth and smiled. Your subordinate is really interesting. Sanson straightened his back after being praised and his face was full of joy. Chu Luiyue looked at him sympathetically. Fortunately, Senior Tangku was not here now, otherwise, Mr. Su will be with me during this time, but not many people know about this. Master, don't worry. Sanson knows what to say and what not to say. Sanson immediately made a zipping motion on his mouth. Chu Luiyue nodded with satisfaction. It's good that you know. Actually, she was not worried about this. The people of the 13th Yu sect were all tight-lipped, especially Sanson. This was also one of the reasons why she brought Sanson with her. I'll have to trouble you for the rest. After saying that, Su Li's figure flashed and disappeared again. Sanson smacked his lips and still felt that it was unbelievable. While waiting, he had already guessed that Mr. Su must have been brought back by his master when she went to Tangku's tomb. Judging from Mr. Su's attitude, he seemed to be quite close to his master. He knew that his master was powerful, but he didn't expect that even someone like Mr. Su could. Sanson gave him a thumbs up and was sincerely convinced. Master, you're really awesome. Sanson believed that she was already very good at making connections, but compared to her master, TSK they couldn't compare. As long as she followed her master well, what else was impossible? Chu Luiyue was already immune to Sanson's flattery and praise. He raised his chin. Scope. Chu Luiyue and Sanson quickly returned to the Yu residence. Naturally, they quickly learned of the news of Bailey Jun's death. He's gone. Chu Luiyue was originally flipping through a medical book. When he heard this, he immediately stopped what he was doing and looked up in surprise. Rong Xiu was sitting by the window drinking tea. White mist rose in spirals, covering his eyes and brows, making it difficult for people to see through him. Yes, yesterday. His subordinate said that he was unconscious when he left, so he did not suffer any torture. His tone was very indifferent, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. After a short moment of surprise, Chu Luiyue quickly reacted. Rong Xiu and Bailey Jun had always been on bad terms, so it was normal for him to have this attitude. Bailey Jun had been killed by the Black Demon Cave, and only the people of the Black Demon Cave knew how to cure him. However, the Black Demon Cave had been completely wiped out, and Mo Zhou Xian, the only one who had escaped, had his body destroyed, leaving only a soul. It was not surprising that Bailey Jun had fallen into such a state. However, it seemed that Rong Xiu had no intention of helping Bailey Jun from the beginning. After all, you're the leader of the Yuntian Tower. You still have to go back and deal with this matter personally, right? Chu Luiyue asked. Rong Xiu nodded. 36 respected Elder Ming has already sent a message. I waited for you to come back because I wanted to discuss with you when to set off. As the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower, Chu Luiyue naturally had to go back. For this kind of matter, the sooner the better. Chu Luiyue rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She had planned to take advantage of this time to study how to help Su Li recover her body. Tangke used to be a god-level expert, so there was no need to worry too much. She did not expect that before she could take action such a thing would happen. Even though everyone knew that Rong Xiu had already fallen out with Bailey Chun, They still had to save face for Rongxiu. Rongxiu looked at her and asked, "Are you worried about Mr. Su's body?" Chu Liyue sighed. Yes. But Mr. Su was not a god-level expert in the past, so this matter is a little troublesome. I've been reading a lot of medical books recently, but I haven't been able to find a good way. Actually, it was not that there was no way. Other than rebuilding the body, they could also take over the body. But for someone like Su Li, Chu Liyue knew that she would never do such a thing. He had to think of another way. Rongxiu took a sip of tea and thought of something. By the way, the Yuntian Tower has a lot of treasured ancient books. Maybe we can find a way. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up. That's right. I almost forgot about that. The Yuntian Tower had been passed down for thousands of years. It was one of the top clans in the entire world of God. It had a deep foundation and countless treasures. Maybe they could really find something useful. Then let's hurry. Many things in Peach Blossom Dock were already on track, so she did not have to worry much. Also, after the Yuntian Tower's matter is over, I plan to go to the Red Moon Desert personally. Chu Liyue said firmly. Calculating the time, the dangerous months should have passed. This time she had to go no matter what. Rongxiu's lips curved up slightly. All right. The next morning, the duo set off for the Yuntian Tower. After a long journey, they finally reached their destination. By the time they arrived at the ethereal hall, the exalted elders were already there. Seeing the two figures walking side by side and entering hand in hand, many people in the hall had complicated feelings. It had only been a few months since their wedding. However, too many things had happened during this period of time. Chu Liyue had taken over the Peach Blossom Dock and become the head of the Yu clan. Chu Liyue had made a name for herself after making a bet with Yi Wentao. It was said that she had even recruited many God Realm experts to her side, and the cultivators in Peach Blossom Dock were willing to follow her lead. All in all, even if Chu Liyue didn't have the identity of the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower, she could still stand on equal footing with any of the top clans in the world of God. Even if the Yu clan's foundation was still shallow, it couldn't stop them from having countless experts and rich resources. Looking at the smiling, slender and exquisite woman, who would have thought that she had actually relied on her own strength to reach her current position? Recalling the mockery and contempt they had for her in the past, many people felt embarrassed. 36 Exalted Elder Ming was delighted, and he was once again impressed by his holy son's eyesight. If it wasn't for the fact that they were discussing Bailey June's funeral, he would have welcomed her happily. 36 Exalted Elder Ming coughed and walked forward with a solemn expression. Holy Son. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2089. What's going on with the clan leader? Rongxiu went straight to the point. 36 Respected Elder Ming cupped his hands. Your Highness, actually, the clan leader's condition has not been very good. Ever since he fell into a coma, the strength in his body has been depleted. We've tried all sorts of methods. He sighed. Moreover, the clan leader is depressed and shows no signs of waking up. We've tried our best, but we're still unable to reverse the situation. The hall suddenly became much quieter. Chu Liyue raised his eyebrows slightly. These words were somewhat interesting. There was nothing much to say about being poisoned and causing him to fall into a coma. But to be depressed, he didn't need to think to know the reason. Back in Fangzhou City, the matter of Bailey June mistaking Jiang Jiwan for his bloodline had caused an uproar. No man could stand this kind of thing, let alone someone like Bailey June. He had been unparalleled in his life, noble and proud. He had always thought highly of himself. How could he accept such humiliation? Even if no one did anything to him, he probably didn't want to come out to see anyone again. It was fine if no one said anything before, but now that 36 Respected Elder Ming mentioned it, although it was very vague, everyone knew what was going on. Actually, they also felt embarrassed. Rongxiu's brows twitched slightly as if he was somewhat regretful. Some time ago, I and you accidentally found the current nest of the Black Demon Cave. We wanted to force Zhou Xian to hand over the method to unlock the seal. But who knew that he was so cunning that he didn't hesitate to sacrifice the entire Black Demon Cave subordinates to help himself escape? If I could have stopped him back then, perhaps the clan leader. Everyone in the hall was shocked. There's actually such a thing? That's too dangerous. Fortunately, His Highness and the princess consort are safe and sound. That's right. The people of the Black Demon Cave have always been cunning. It's already not easy for His Highness and the princess consort to return safely. Other things can't be forced. Because this matter happened outside of the Divine Ruins world, not many people in the Divine Ruins world knew about it. And because Zhou Xian was still on the run, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu didn't spread the news. Therefore, not even the revered elders of the Yuntian Tower knew about it. When he heard this, he was naturally filled with shock. Chu Luiyue silently glanced at the man beside her. I don't remember Rong Xiu mentioning anything about Bailey June. 36 respected Elder Ming hurriedly asked. Were His Highness and Princess Consort injured? Rong Xiu's expression was calm as a faint smile appeared on his lips. They're all minor injuries. It's worth it to be able to wipe out the Black Demon Cave. The originally noisy hall once again fell into a strange silence. Even 36 respected Elder Ming had a stunned expression on his face. What? Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you. If she hadn't asked for help, we might not have been able to escape unscathed. As Rong Xiu spoke, he looked at Chu Luiyue proudly. Chu Luiyue sighed. Unfortunately, Zhou Xian still escaped. Everyone was in a mess. Do you know what you're talking about? That's the Black Demon Cave. How can you say that you destroyed their nest so casually? Doesn't your conscience hurt? Everyone looked at the two of them as if they were looking at two monsters. These two people were too perverted. Some people secretly wiped their sweat, glad that they didn't take things too hard and offend these two people. Some were filled with uneasiness. They thought that it was already shocking to invite the patriarchs of two ancient divine beast clans to support the wedding. They never expected that there would be something even more outrageous. They really didn't know how His Highness chose this heaven-defying princess. Originally, he alone was already awe-inspiring enough. Now there was also Chu Luiyue. They simply didn't want anyone to live. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes wandered back and forth between the two of them. He stroked his beard and sighed. Actually, Your Highness has already done your best for the Patriarch. It's a pity that the Patriarch's luck was a little bad. He has already passed away. Your Highness, don't be too sad about this. I'll have to trouble Your Highness with the following matters. Rong Xiu nodded. Of course. The Patriarch sacrificed a lot for the Yuntian Tower when he was alive. Now that he's dead, he naturally has to be buried grandly. Inform the people of the 28 divisions that everyone must be present to send off the Patriarch on his last journey. 36 respected Elder Ming asked hesitantly. Of course, Your Highness, there's no problem with doing this, but is the Immortal Water Mausoleum going to be the same? At the mention of the Immortal Water Mausoleum, everyone's expressions became interesting. That was the Jiang family's territory. Although the patriarch of the Jiang family in the Immortal Water Mausoleum had changed, the previous incident still happened to the Jiang family. If they came, wouldn't the situation be very awkward? Bailey June was dead, but they were still alive. They still wanted to save face. Rong Xiu's expression didn't change. Of course. A dead person is like an extinguished lamp. Let bygones be bygones. It would have been better if he hadn't said anything. Now that he said it, the atmosphere became even more awkward. How could they let this matter pass? The storm had finally calmed down. If they made a big fuss now, what would the other aristocratic families think of them? After a moment, a respected elder spoke hesitantly. Your Highness, this matter should be considered at length, right? The Patriarch was very controversial when he was alive. Why don't we let him pass away quietly? What do you think? With one person taking the lead, the rest immediately followed suit. That's right, Your Highness. Speaking of which, the Patriarch died at the hands of the Black Demon Cave. If this matter was publicized, it would be bad for the reputation of the Yuntian Tower and the Patriarch. Shouldn't we keep a low profile? That's right. If the Patriarch's spirit is in heaven, he should also wish for this, right? We can all understand Your Highness's feelings, but this matter is not trivial. I hope Your Highness will reconsider. Everyone chimed in and quickly reached a consensus. They all persuaded Rong Xiu to give up on the idea of burying Bailey June. Rong Xiu frowned slightly, seemingly hesitant. 36 respected Elder Ming cupped his fists and bowed. I hope Your Highness will consider the Yuntian Tower. The bigger picture is more important. Rong Xiu was silent for a long time. Finally he said, all right. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2090. Yan Qing. Rong Xiu tilted his head slightly. Yan Qing, who was following behind him, immediately stepped forward and took out a stack of papers. This is the eulogy I wrote for the patriarch. Everyone, please burn it in front of the patriarch's tomb to comfort his soul in heaven." After that, Yanqing went over and distributed the papers. One for each person. There was no mistake. She had done all she could to go this far. There was nothing to nitpick about. Chu Luiyue was in awe as she watched from the side. TSK. In fact, from the beginning, Rong Xiu didn't intend to worry about this matter. What he said just now was just for show. But in this way everything went smoothly. Even if this matter was spread out later, he would only agree to it because everyone begged him. He wouldn't be blamed at all. Bailey Jun had been the hegemon of the Yuntian Tower for many years, but in the end he ended up in such a miserable state. Of course he had only himself to blame for all this. Bailey Jun was buried in a hurry. He didn't have any children and his reputation was ruined because of the incident in Fangzhou City. No one in the entire Yuntian Tower went to pay respects to him. After his death, the name Bailey Jun seemed to be quickly forgotten by everyone. It was as if this person had never existed here. On the day of his burial, Rong Xiu officially became the patriarch of the Yuntian Tower in the main hall of the sacrificial god temple. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. Chu Luiyue knew that Rong Xiu had his own plans, so he didn't interfere. After arriving at the Yuntian Tower, he went straight to the library. As Rong Xiu said, the books in the library of the Yuntian Tower were extremely precious. Some of them were books that Chu Luiyue hadn't even seen in Lingxiao College. The number of books in the library was indeed astonishing. Chu Luiyue read very quickly. At first she only chose medical books, but later she gradually picked some miscellaneous books. She learned a lot from them, but she still didn't find what she wanted the most. After reading for a few days without sleep, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but feel discouraged. Putting the books in his hand back, Chu Luiyue let out a long breath. Rong Xiu walked over. "There are so many books. You can't finish reading them in a short time." As he said, he carried her and walked to the small bed beside him. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to struggle, but she really couldn't take it anymore after a few days. Thus, she obediently leaned into his embrace. There were too many books here. Even if she read for half a year, she probably wouldn't be able to finish them all. What if she still couldn't find a solution after reading all of them? "Rong Xiu, don't you think I'm wasting too much time searching like this?" Rong Xiu gently placed her on the small couch and sat at the side. He then placed her head on his lap, and his slender fingers touched her temple as he started to massage it with moderate strength. Chu Luiyue snuggled into his arms comfortably. Rong Xiu paused and looked at her with a deep gaze. "Don't move." Chu Luiyue immediately became obedient. "Oh." Rong Xiu adjusted her posture before continuing. He asked casually, "This is not easy. It's not that easy to begin with. After all, no one has ever done this before." Chu Luiyue was silent for a moment, then suddenly opened her eyes. "No, maybe someone has done this before." She straightened up and threw herself into Rong Xiu's arms. She placed her hands on his chest and said word by word, "I'm going to Peach Blossom Cove now. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2091. Rong Xiu was originally sitting down, but when she moved, he immediately reached out one hand to support himself on the couch and used the other hand to support her waist. Their bodies were close together. She was on top and he was on the bottom. They could smell each other's breaths. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. Are you sure you want to talk to me like this?" Chu Luiyue realized that their posture was not right. She blushed and immediately wanted to crawl away. Rong Xiu held her waist, raised his head slightly and kissed her lips. His deep voice was blurred between their lips. "I'll go with you." Chu Luiyue thought in a daze that this was not bad. Tang Ku had been following Rong Xiu. If the two of them went together, they might be able to help Tang Ku and Suli recover together. Of course, she also wanted to see how Debao and the rest were doing. Sensing that she was distracted, Rong Xiu bit her gently. "Hiss." Chu Luiyue subconsciously moved back and murmured, feeling wronged. "It hurts." Rong Xiu chuckled and comforted her patiently. "I'll be gentler." Red Moon Desert. Unknowingly, the overwhelming crimson color had quietly dissipated. The blazing sun scorched the vast desert. The terrifyingly high temperature seemed to burn even the air. There was no wind, but heat waves rolled. Only the blue waves in the middle of the desert occasionally rippled. Under the lake, there was a cage that was dark and sunless. The strong smell of blood filled the air. There were dark red bloodstains everywhere, as if an unusually fierce battle had just taken place. 3 figures sat facing each other in a triangle. They were Dugumobao and his companions. At this moment, an extremely complicated silver Xian formation was floating above their heads, rotating slowly. A faint glow enveloped the 3 of them. It was extremely powerful. If Chu Liwei was here, he would definitely discover that this profound formation was extremely similar to the one summoned by Lingxiao College on Thousand Wine Mountain, but it was even more complicated and obscure. Under the profound formation, there was a palm-sized black shadow at the center of the 3 people. There seemed to be some kind of strange pattern on the shadow, but it was incomplete and could not be distinguished. Time passed slowly and the shadow gradually faded away. When the last dot completely disappeared, the profound formation above the 3 people's heads also stopped rotating at the same time and then dissipated with a loud bang. Puff! Dugumabao's body shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Diwu Zhangzi's and Lan Zhao's conditions weren't any better. Their auras had become much weaker. Mother ***, he's so hard to deal with. Diwu Zhangzi forced himself to hold on and couldn't help but curse. Fortunately Yu and Rong Xiu released this old man's aura, otherwise he might not have been able to make it through this time. He looked at Dugumobao and Lan Xiao. How are you guys? Dugumobao raised his hand, wiped the blood from the corner of his lips and slowly opened his eyes. I'm fine. Lan Xiao was still chained up and he could only barely move when he heard that. He raised a hand, covered half of his face and laughed. What a pity. I was quite satisfied with this face this time, but it was ruined just like that. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. You're still thinking about this at a time like this. Although that was what he said, he still heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Lan Xiao still had the mood to talk about this. Lan Zhao's mouth twitched and the face under his hand was already badly damaged. Don't worry, I won't die. It's not that easy to take my life. It's naturally not easy to kill you when you're at your peak, but it's not difficult to take your life now. Dugumobao looked over coldly and his voice didn't fluctuate as he spoke. Lan Xiao pursed his lips and tried hard to roll his eyes. I knew you wouldn't say anything good. Dugumobao ignored him and continued, your soul can't last for too long. If you can't reconstruct your divine body as soon as possible, it's only a matter of time before your soul disperses. After saying that, the surroundings went silent for a moment. They all knew that Dugumobao was speaking the truth. After a while, Lan Xiao leaned lazily against the stone wall behind him and muttered with a headache, reconstruct your divine body? It's easy to say, but do you think everyone is as sick as you? Moreover, he had already failed once before, which made things worse. He could barely survive the dangerous months this time because of Dugumobao and Diwu Zhangzi's help. How could it be so easy to reconstruct his divine body? Then the corners of his mouth twitched as he chuckled nonchalantly. It's fine even if I can't survive. I've been trapped in this lousy place for so long. Even if you guys aren't annoyed, I'm annoyed, Dugumobao said coldly. If you want to die, why didn't you seize any of the many chances in the past 10,000 years? Lan Xiao couldn't keep his face straight. I'm just saying. What do you take it for real? Diwu Zhangzi held his forehead helplessly. The dangerous months had just ended and they were arguing again. He really didn't know how he had been stuck between the two of them all these years. Besides, even if I'm really going to die, I have to see you one more time before I die, right? Suddenly, Dugumobao's expression changed slightly and he stood up. He's here. He turned around and glanced at Lan Xiao indifferently. You can die without regrets. Lan Xiao. Will it kill you to say something nice? Can't you see that I'm already in this state? Even if she's here. Wait, who did you say came? Lan Xiao was about to scold him when he suddenly froze. Diwu Zhangzi had already reacted. He was delighted at first, then asked nervously, is here? How did she get here so quickly? Dugumobao frowned slightly. The dangerous months this time are longer than before, so she's not that fast anymore. After all, it's been a long time since Rong Xiu sent Diwu Zhangzi's aura back. But fortunately it's all in the past. That won't do. Our current situation, Diwu Zhangzi was fine, but Dugumobao was injured and Lan Xiao was the most seriously injured. But if that last saw it, she would definitely guess something. Lan Xiao hurriedly said, that's right. My face hasn't recovered yet, so I can't see her. I can't see her. Dugumobao glanced at the two of them. She can't enter this place for the time being, so what are you worried about? After his reminder, Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao came back to their senses and heaved a sigh of relief. That's good, Rong Xiao is here too. Dugu Maobao's eyes were filled with impatience. Diwu Zhangze hesitated. It's probably because I told them about the dangerous months last time, so they came together because they were worried. Dugu Maobao said, stay here. You guys stay here. I'll go out and meet them. At the same time, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao finally arrived at the lake. Chu Luiyue surveyed her surroundings and slightly knitted her brows. Rong Xiao asked, what's wrong? I don't know. I keep feeling that something is wrong here. It's different from before. Chu Luiyue's nose twitched slightly, and a hint of suspicion flashed across her eyes. Rong Xiao, do you smell blood? Rong Xiao's eyes flickered slightly and he shook his head. Oh. He looked around as well. This place seems to be the same as before. What do you think is wrong? Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. Yes, she knew that this desert didn't look any different from before. As far as the eye could see, it was still an endless stretch of yellow sand. And the lake in front of her was still the same as before. It was difficult for such a simple and vast scenery to change. But she just felt that something was different. This feeling was very subtle and she didn't know how to describe it. Maybe it's my illusion. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a while before saying with some uncertainty. Rong Xiao squeezed her hand, and his slightly calloused palm completely covered her hand. Maybe it's because of Wei Yu? Chu Luiyue was deep in thought. Maybe. She shook her head and suppressed these messy thoughts. I wonder how Dabeo and the others are doing now. Before she finished speaking, layers of ripples suddenly appeared on the surface of the water. The lake water slowly separated from the middle and a small figure walked out. It was a boy who looked to be 3 or 4 years old. He had purple hair and purple eyes and was very cute. Only the astonishing pressure faintly emitted from his body made people dare not underestimate him. Chu Luiyue was delighted. Dabeo. When Dugu Maobao saw her, a faint smile finally appeared on his iceberg-like face. But this smile quickly disappeared when he saw Rong Xiao standing next to him. Rong Xiao nodded slightly. Senior Dugu. Chu Luiyue had long been used to Dugu Maobao's cold appearance, so she didn't care. She quickly went forward and asked, Dabeo, how are you doing? Also, how are Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Xiao? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2092. Dugu Maobao leaped into the air and arrived in front of the two of them in an instant. He landed on the sand dune and raised his wrist gently. The separated lake quickly closed and returned to its original calm state. Don't worry, we're all fine. Chu Luiyue breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that. That's good. She had been very worried when she heard Diwu Zhangze talk about the dangerous moon. Seemed to be very serious and dangerous. Diwu Zhangze and the other two weren't ordinary people. Until now, Chu Luiyue still didn't know how strong they were. The only thing she was sure of was that they were definitely more powerful than she expected. Even they found this dangerous moon tricky. It was not hard to imagine how dangerous the situation was. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue's eyes focused and stared at Dugu Maobao. Dugu Maobao noticed something and asked, What's wrong? Chu Luiyue did not speak. She walked straight to Dugu Maobao and pointed at his collar. What's this? Dugu Maobao was taken aback as he lowered his head to take a look. Only then did he see that his collar was stained with blood. The blood was only the size of a fingernail and had already soaked into his clothes. It was very inconspicuous. But Chu Luiyue's eyes were sharp and saw it at a glance. Dugu Maobao frowned slightly. It should have been accidentally stained when he vomited blood at the end. Because she came at such a coincidence, he did not have time to check it carefully before coming out. It's a little blood. Dugu Maobao looked up. The expression in his eyes had returned to calmness. It's inevitable to get injured in the dangerous moon, but it's not a big deal. After he finished speaking with a thought, a ray of light flashed and the bloodstain disappeared completely. Under the illumination of the sun, his clothes were like armor, glowing with a delicate and light light. His tone was casual, as if he did not take this matter to heart at all. Chu Luiyue scrutinized him as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Dugu Maobao looked at her quietly. Chu Luiyue felt a little helpless. Dabeo looked like a child, but in reality he was an old fox who had lived for countless years. His intelligence and means were not lacking. If he really wanted to hide something, it should be very difficult for her to detect it. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, but Chu Luiyue couldn't see anything. In the end he could only give up. It's good that you're all right. She looked at the calm lake again. Where are Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Shao? Why didn't he come out? If it was in the past, they would have greeted her the moment she entered the Red Moon Desert. This time, however, it was strangely quiet. After Diwu merged with that aura, he has been recuperating. Lan Shao is thinking about reconstructing his divine body. Dugu Maobao's answer was flawless. Chu Luiyue calmed down a little. Hearing Shi Yan mention the god body, he remembered the purpose of this trip. By the way, Dabeo, speaking of this, I have something to ask you. Speak. Chu Luiyue paused and asked word by word. Previously, when you reconstructed your divine body, how did you do it? Dugu Maobao looked at her strangely. Weren't you there at that time too? She should be the one who knew best how he did it. Chu Luiyue shook her head. No, what I mean is that ordinary cultivators can't do it with their own strength. But you, Dugu Maobao's eyes showed a hint of dissatisfaction. I'm not an ordinary cultivator. Of course I can do it. Who was she questioning? Chu Luiyue. It had been so long, so his arrogant and conceited personality hadn't changed at all. She suddenly let out a long sigh of relief and couldn't help but rub Dabeo's hair. Dabeo's expression changed. Just as he was about to flare up, he heard Chu Luiyue sigh. Hearing you say that, I'm relieved. Dabeo was still the same Dabeo. If he could say something like that, it meant that the situation should be fine. Hearing this, Dabao paused. He looked up and saw her smiling brightly as if she had heaved a sigh of relief. The anger in his heart suddenly disappeared without a trace. Chu Luiyue was a little curious and asked excitedly. So your strength is really above the venerable gods? Dabeo tilted his head and looked at her impatiently. His face said, Do you still need to ask such nonsense? Chu Luiyue retracted her hand in embarrassment. Big brother, I can't afford to offend him. You came this time to ask about this? Dabeo's voice was already full of undisguised disdain. Chu Luiyue shook her head. No, I came this time to do two things. The first thing I want to ask is, do you know how to help a 9th stage warrior reconstruct his physical body? I've read many books, but I couldn't find the answer. Dugu Maobao narrowed his eyes. Who do you want to help? Chu Luiyue immediately told him about Su Li. There's really no other way, so I thought that maybe you would know. It's a small matter. He interrupted Chu Luiyue. What's the second thing? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. He actually knew. However, before she could be shocked, she immediately said when she heard Dugu Maobao's question. The second thing is, I thought that I helped you reconstruct your divine body before, so I came this time to help Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Shao. Before she could finish speaking, Dugu Maobao's face darkened. No. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why not? There's no why. Dugu Maobao's attitude was very firm. I said no and it means no. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2093. His voice traveled to the bottom of the lake. Lan Shao finally couldn't help but scold. What's wrong with him? You already said that she wants to help. Why did he reject her? Does that mean that you can help him? I haven't said anything yet. Diwu Xianxia glanced at him. Then you can go and say it now. They were trapped here and couldn't go out except for the night of the Red Moon. However, the entire Red Moon Desert was under their control. As long as they spoke, that girl outside would definitely hear them. You want you to help? Of course not. Then why are you talking about it? Lan Shao looked up. Wants to help me. What's the point of rejecting her? Even if I want to reject her, I have to say it personally. It wasn't easy for you to show concern for him, but before he could get anything, he was mercilessly stopped by Dabeo. Who could stand this? Diwu Xianxia reminded him. That girl can't come in now and you can't go out either. You can't handle this. Lan Shao rolled his eyes. You only know how to pour cold water on me. Who said that she can't come in? Isn't Rongxiu here too? As long as he's willing to help, Diwu Xianxia coughed. Lower your voice, Dabeo can hear you. Lan Shao choked and his initial arrogance was immediately extinguished. Also, don't forget what your face looks like now. Do you really want to see her like this? This sentence hit the nail on the head. Lan Shao was enlightened, then he hugged his head in pain. How could I forget about this? He lay down on the side weakly and felt sorry for himself. My peerless beauty is ruined just like that. Diwu Zhangzi closed his eyes and couldn't be bothered with him. That face of his was changed every day and he didn't seem to be in pain. Besides, when was he not like this? What was there to cry about? Chu Luiyue didn't expect Debao to reject so firmly and was stunned for a moment. Looking at Debao's solemn little face, she was full of doubts. It shouldn't be. Didn't I help Debao before? Helping Lan Xiao this time shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, Debao and the other two were very close. Logically speaking, Debao had no reason to reject her. Are you sure? Debao's expression did not change. He raised his eyes and looked at her steadily. That won't do. Last time was just an accident. The same thing will not happen again. Chu Luiyue was about to persuade him again when Debao continued. Lan Xiao isn't useless. He will settle this matter himself. If he really can't, there's still me and Diwu. You don't have to worry anymore. That one sentence had pretty much sealed off all possibilities. Chu Luiyue frowned. She really didn't know what Debao was thinking. But from the looks of it, he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. She thought for a moment and nodded. All right. Since you've said so, then I won't interfere. However, you promised to help Mr. Su before, so I'll start right here. If there's anything wrong, it's convenient for me to ask you at any time, right? Debao frowned slightly. It was really inconvenient to keep her here at this time. But if he rejected her now, it would arouse her suspicion again. He had always been smart. After thinking for a moment, he finally nodded. Under the scorching sun, the heat wave in the desert was overwhelming. Chu Luiyue stood on a sand dune and summoned the heavenly square cauldron. Mr. Su, you can come out first. As soon as she finished speaking, Su Li's figure flew out. She came to Chu Luiyue's side and looked around, only to find that there was no one else here except for Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. She was stunned for a moment and asked cautiously, where's the senior you mentioned? Before coming to the Red Moon Desert this time, Chu Luiyue told her that she planned to come to the Red Moon Desert to look for a senior. That senior might have a way to solve her problem. But as far as the eye could see, there was only yellow sand everywhere. There was no one at all. Chu Luiyue smiled. That senior doesn't like to see strangers, so he has already gone back. But don't worry, Mr. Su. He does know how to help you reconstruct your physical body. I invited you out because I'm going to use the heavenly square cauldron to refine medicine for you. Su Li's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Chu Luiyue nodded with a smile. Of course. She knew that Dugu Maobao and the others didn't like too many people knowing that they were here. So before coming, she had already thought about it and decided not to reveal these things first. Along the way, although Su Li stayed in the heavenly square cauldron, now that the heavenly square cauldron had recognized Chu Luiyue as its master, she only needed to think about it to hide these things from Su Li. After asking Debao, she officially invited Su Li out. Of course, before that, she and Rong Xiu had already changed places. The Red Moon Desert was vast and boundless. And the place where the lake was located was the most central and also the most confidential location. And this place was quite a distance from there, so there was no need to worry about being discovered. Su Li didn't suspect anything and immediately nodded in understanding. Since that senior even knew this, he must be a very powerful person. It was normal for such a powerful existence to not like the secular world. Please thank that senior for me. Su Li said seriously. Also, I've really troubled you with this matter. Chu Luiyue smiled. Mr. Su, don't be in a hurry to say these things. I know the method, but whether it will work or not is still unknown. It won't be too late to thank you after you really reconstruct your physical body. Su Li shook her head and smiled with her dimples. Whether it succeeds or not, Su Li will remember this kindness in her heart. Chu Luiyue blinked. Although Su Li had extremely high attainments in refining weapons and was considered famous in the entire Divine Ruins world, she didn't have much experience in the world and her personality was still pure and kind. It was no wonder that Tangku had deep feelings for her. She curled her lips into a smile and whispered, "You can just wait by the side first." Su Li nodded and walked to the side. She nodded and greeted Rong Xiu and then began to wait quietly. Chu Luiyue took out the medicinal herbs according to the prescription given by Debao and arranged them in order beside her. After a while, all kinds of boxes were densely packed around her. There were at least a few hundred kinds. But the key was that she didn't seem to be stopping until now. Su Li watched from the side and couldn't help but feel nervous. So many medicinal herbs. Chu Luiyue said while taking the medicinal herbs. Yes, the level of the pill to be refined this time is not low, so a lot of medicinal herbs are needed. Su Li frowned slightly. It wasn't that she had never seen a celestial physician refining medicine, but such a lineup still surprised her. What level is it? Why is it so troublesome? Chu Liwei paused and looked over. Great physician. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2094. What? Su Li was shocked. She couldn't help but widen her eyes. She almost suspected that she had heard wrongly. A grand physician level pill? A grand physician was a level above that of a physician. It was the highest level of celestial physician. Even in Lingxiao College there were very few celestial physicians who could reach this level. And they were basically elders who were very old. For example, Elder Wan Jing. He could be considered one of the top celestial physician elders in Lingxiao College. However, he was already more than 100 years old when he broke through to become a grand physician. Chu Luiyue was not even 20 years old now, but she was challenging to refine a grand physician level pill. It was no wonder that Su Li had such a big reaction. In front of Chu Luiyue, Su Li couldn't say that she doubted her ability. However, even if she didn't say it, Chu Luiyue knew what she was thinking. Mr. Su, whether I succeed or not, I have to give it a try. If I succeed, everything will be fine. What do you think? In fact, not long after she recovered her memory, she had already broken through to become a physician. As for a grand physician, although she hadn't broken through yet, she had vaguely touched the threshold of that level. It just so happened that this was a rare opportunity. Even if it was difficult, she had to give it a try. Su Li looked at her determined expression and inexplicably calmed down a lot. Someone who could make the celestial shield recognize him as its master must be extraordinary. She clenched her fists and cautioned carefully, "Okay, but you must be careful. Just try your best. Don't force it." She didn't want to implicate Chu Luiyue because of her. Chu Luiyue smiled. "Don't worry, I know what to do." After saying that, she began to take out the herbs again. Fortunately, she was well prepared. She had all the herbs she needed. Otherwise, this trip would be troublesome. After a while, she finally prepared all the herbs. Just in case, she prepared 5 sets. If she failed, she could still try a few more times. After confirming that everything was fine, Chu Luiyue came in front of the heavenly square cauldron and hit it with her palm. Boom! A ball of transparent flame began to burn. Chu Luiyue began to methodically put the medicinal herbs around him in one after another. Her movements were very fast but also very smooth. When these herbs fell into the heavenly square cauldron, they were quickly divided into several parts of the flames that devoured and refined them. Soon, a faint bitter medicinal fragrance filled the air. Su Li murmured in surprise. Is this really the level of a doctor? She had seen many doctors before, but none of them could be compared to Chu Luiyue. Whether it was the control of the flame, the selection of the herbs, or the control of the entire process, Chu Luiyue could be said to be the best. Su Li couldn't help but look at Rong Xiu, who was next to her, but she saw that his expression was the same as usual. He was calm and composed without the slightest hint of surprise. It was as if he had expected Chu Luiyue to do this. Su Li couldn't help but sigh in her heart. From the moment she left the wind separation cave, she knew that these two people were not simple. But she also didn't expect them to be so powerful. During this period she had stayed with Chu Luiyue in Peach Blossom Cove for some time and heard a lot about Chu Luiyue. Naturally, this included the battle between Chu Luiyue and Yi Wentao. He fought against Her Eminence in the High God realm and won in the end. Since then he had dominated Peach Blossom Cove. Su Li had always thought that Chu Luiyue's talent as a martial artist and a Xian master was the best, but now she realized that she was very wrong. This person had the most outstanding talent in every aspect of cultivation. Time passed slowly. Su Li watched from the side as Chu Luiyue refined the herbs bit by bit. Her initial shock gradually turned into acceptance. Most of the cultivators in this world were partial talents. They were extremely talented in only one aspect of cultivation and were lacking in other aspects. She herself was the best example. Even after she became a weapon refining saint, her cultivation as a martial artist was still at rank 9 and she couldn't even break through to become a high god. Even if there were some people who had 2 or more talents at the same time, it was actually very difficult for them to do well in all aspects. This was because it required a lot of time and energy. It was already very difficult for an ordinary person to focus on one thing and stand out in one aspect, let alone others. But Chu Luiyue, This was truly heaven-defying. Su Li sighed silently in her heart. Martial artist, Xian master, weapon refiner, celestial physician. She did all of them extremely well. Not to mention people of the same age. Even many elders who had cultivated for many years might not be able to do better than her. This really depended on talent. Of course, it also depended on hard work. Both were indispensable. Other than that, Chu Liwei also contracted 2 divine beasts, which were closely related to the 2 ancient divine beast clans. Such a person was simply too terrifying. Chu Liwei focused on the heavenly square medicine cauldron in front of her. At this moment she had already refined over 100 herbs. And this wasn't even half of it. While controlling the heat, she kept recalling the prescription that Dabeo gave her in her mind. She was extremely cautious and didn't dare to relax at all. However, what made her feel a little relieved was that she realized that her alchemy skills had indeed increased compared to before. Although she hadn't been able to take out much time to refine pills during this period of time, it seemed to be easier than expected due to the increase in her abilities in all aspects. She continued to put the remaining herbs in one by one. On the other side, Dugu Maobao had already returned to the bottom of the lake. As soon as he returned, Lan Xiao harumphed harshly and turned around. Dugu Maobao obviously didn't care as he walked straight to his seat and sat down. Diwu Xianxia pointed up and asked tentatively, "Dabeo, did you just give the girl the prescription for the soul concentrating pill? That's a master physician level pill." Dugu Maobao closed his eyes as if he didn't want to bother. However, Diwu Xianxia couldn't hold it in and continued asking. "The girl wants to help that Mr. Su reconstruct the body of a stage 9 warrior. Actually, a Qingyang pill of the doctor level is enough." "Why did you?" Before he could finish, he suddenly realized something and widened his eyes abruptly as he pointed at Dugu Maobao with a trembling finger. Dugu Maobao opened his eyes and said calmly, "I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose." What? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2095. You did it on purpose. Why are you still asking me what's wrong? Looking at Dugu Maobao's self-righteous face, Diwu Xianxia almost scolded him. You really? Meeting that pair of cold purple eyes, Diwu Xiangxia's strong desire to live forced him to swallow the words that he was about to blurt out. He gave him a thumbs up and praised him insincerely. "You're so smart." The coldness on Dugu Maobao's face faded a little. "It's been so long yet you're still a doctor. It'll be even worse if you don't spur her on. Since she came here on her own this time, it's a rare opportunity." Diwu Xiangxia was speechless. Although it wasn't the first time Dugu Maobao did something like this. But every time he could set a new low and set a new record. He was quite impressive. But every time he had a good reason and made others speechless. Of course, this others was mainly referring to him and Lan Xiao. The reason why they succumbed time and time again was purely due to Dugu Maobao's authority. After hesitating for a while, he couldn't help but ask. "Dabeo, I know you're doing this for your sake, but she's still a doctor now. She hasn't even looked at the prescription of a doctor. You suddenly came and wanted her to try refining this level of pill. Isn't that making things difficult for her?" "Exactly." Lan Xiao stood up abruptly, crossed his arms and sneered. "It's so difficult to refine that soul-consolidating pill. If there's a mistake, all the previous efforts will be wasted and it'll be a complete failure. It's fine if this pill refinement fails, but what if the girl gets hurt?" He was already furious because Dugu Maobao had rejected Yuer's help for him. Now that he heard this, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Dugu Maobao glanced at the two of them coldly. "Who said she hasn't seen it?" "You." The two were about to argue, but their expressions changed when they heard him. "What do you mean?" Dugu Maobao brushed the non-existent dust off his clothes and said calmly, "She's seen it a few years ago." Diwu Xiangxia frowned. "That's not right. You didn't show her a doctor's prescription." His voice suddenly stopped as he stared at Dugu Maobao in disbelief. Lan Xiao suddenly realized something too. "You bastard. You mixed in the prescription of the great doctor?" "No." Dugu Maobao was calm and composed. "I added some doctor's points into the prescription of a grand doctor." Chu Luiyue naturally didn't know what was happening under the lake. He just felt a little strange. Although she had never seen the formula for the soul-concentrating pill, she found that it was much easier to refine than she had imagined. There were indeed many types and quantities of these medicinal herbs, but it was not troublesome to arrange them according to the order. However, this thought only flashed through her mind for a moment before she quickly suppressed it. If he could successfully refine it, it would naturally be for the best. Zhou Xian stood with his hands behind his back, quietly watching from the side. Suddenly, a gentle breeze blew over. An extremely faint fragrance filled the air. His brows moved slightly as he turned to look. That was the direction of Mirror Lake. And he couldn't be more familiar with this fragrance. It was the scent of the dancing lotus. He stared at it for a while, and there seemed to be waves gradually surging in his deep eyes. Then he moved his fingers slightly and a golden light flashed past. That faint fragrance quickly dissipated. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2096. This minute ripple did not attract Chu Liyue's attention. She concentrated on refining the various medicinal herbs in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron. Just this point alone consumed her an entire day's time. When night fell, she finally put the last medicinal herb in. The Red Moon Desert at night was exceptionally cold. On the sand dunes, a thin layer of frost seemed to have condensed. The cold air was bone-piercing. But fortunately, this was not considered a problem to Chu Liyue. In front of her, the transparent flame in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron burned continuously. The fire clearly lit up the surroundings. Under the dark sky, this wisp of fire was especially conspicuous. An increasingly rich medicinal fragrance spread out from within. Chu Liyue held her breath. The medicinal herbs were already refined. The next thing to do was to condense the pill. This step was even more complicated and hard to determine. The slightest bit of carelessness would result in a complete loss. Hence Chu Liyue was even more cautious at this time. She started to fuse these medicinal herbs bit by bit. Su Li gasped in amazement as she watched by the side. So many medicinal herbs. Even if you let me remember, I also can't remember. You not only can put them in an order, she can even control the fire and fuse their medicinal properties together. Truly incredible. She knew nothing about celestial physician. But she could also see how hard it was to refine this grand physician-level medicinal pill. And Chu Liyue was still so young. If she succeeds this time, she should be able to become the youngest grand physician in the Divine Ruins world, right? Su Li heaved a long sigh. Even if she did not succeed, looking at Chu Liyue's series of skilled reactions, she should also not be far from breaking through. Condense. Chu Liyue gave a clear cry. The flame in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron suddenly pounced. All the medicinal herbs thoroughly gathered. A fist-sized medicinal pill gradually took shape. But right at this time, an explosive energy suddenly rushed out from that medicinal pill. Chu Liyue secretly cursed. She immediately controlled the flame to surge up, attempting to suppress it. However, the power condensed within the pill was too strong. It was simply not something that Chu Liyue could control when it suddenly exploded. Several streams of turbulence directly broke through the encirclement of the flames and rushed towards Chu Liyue. Zhou Xian narrowed his eyes, but in the end he restrained his impulse to make a move. Chu Liyue tapped the ground with his toes and quickly set up a barrier in front of him. Boom! Boom! The shockingly violent force fiercely slammed into the barrier in front of Chu Liyue, causing a series of explosions. Chu Liyue only felt a terrifying pressure crushing down on her, causing her feet to sink deep into the sand. Fortunately, this force came and went quickly. In addition, Chu Liyue's summoning barrier was timely enough, so he was not injured. It was a pity that the pill was destroyed. Chu Liyue pulled his feet out of the sand and looked at the medicinal cauldron in front of him. There was only a pile of ashes left in the transparent medicinal cauldron. A faint burnt smell wafted over. Chu Liyue coughed and rubbed her nose. This great doctor-level pill was really not easy to refine. Su Li was worried when she saw this and immediately wanted to go forward. Chu Liyue waved her hand. It's normal to fail in refining pills. What's more, this is my first time trying to challenge this level. It's inevitable that there will be mistakes. But after a few more tries it should be enough. You don't have to worry. Seeing that Chu Liyue seemed to be in a good state, Su Li could only wait quietly in the same place. Chu Liyue tidied up the medicinal cauldron, then closed her eyes and began to recall what went wrong during the refining process. After pondering for a long time, she finally opened her eyes and began the second attempt. With the experience of the first time, the second time was indeed more convenient. However, Chu Liyue did not dare to slack off. At this time it was already noon of the second day. The frost on the ground had already melted without a trace, and the ground became boiling hot again. Fortunately, Chu Liwei had stayed here for quite some time before, so she was already used to it. The rich medicinal fragrance once again permeated the air. "Sai, I don't know if you will succeed this time." Under the lake, Diwu Zhangzi muttered worriedly. Lan Xiao glanced at him. "Be content. To be able to do this on her first try, she's already 1 in a million. Diwu Zhangzi snorted. "If it were someone else, I naturally wouldn't have such hopes. But you, isn't someone else. Besides, didn't Daoist say that he had already shown her many great doctor-level prescriptions? With her comprehension, what can't she do? Daoist, don't you think so?" It would have been fine if he didn't mention this, but now that he did, Lan Xiao was speechless. He quickly glanced at Dugumobao. Only he would do such a wicked thing, and he still has the cheek to say it. Isn't he afraid that she won't know what's important and will practice it wrongly? Dugumobao's expression didn't change. She accepted all those Xian formations back then, let alone these prescriptions. "Lan Xiao, don't think that everyone in the world is like you just because you're stupid." Lan Xiao was furious and was about to get up, but he forgot that he was still chained up and was pulled back again. He was just a soul now, and logically speaking he shouldn't feel any pain. However, these chains were very strange. Once he moved too much, they would punish him. A dark light flashed across the chains and Lan Xiao's aura instantly withered. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. "You're in the worst situation now. Stay here obediently and don't torment yourself." Lan Xiao clenched his teeth and laughed. "If it was back then, how could such a small thing trap me?" Dugumobao said calmly. "Since you know it's not like back then, don't force yourself. Based on your current situation, it'll be extremely difficult for you to condense a divine body." At the mention of this, Lan Xiao finally fell silent. He half leaned against the wall behind him, lowered his head and didn't speak for a long time. Diwu Zhangzi nodded. "Big Bao is right. It wasn't easy to get through the dangerous months, and you can rest well." Speaking of this, he looked at Dugumobao with a headache. "But this is easy to say, but it's very troublesome to do. Especially now that Yura is still here. When she was here in the past, the situation wasn't so bad. Every time there was a dangerous month, they could use all kinds of reasons to send her away. They didn't need to spend much effort to hide everything. But now, I don't know how long she'll stay here this time. If the dangerous months come again." Dugumobao pondered for a long time. "I keep feeling that she seems to have sensed something. If she can't personally witness you and Lan Xiao recovering your divine bodies, she probably won't leave so easily. On the surface she said that she came this time to help Su Li, but after meeting and talking with her, Dugumobao knew that this wasn't her only purpose." Diwu Zhangzi frowned. "This is troublesome." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2097. That time in Dugumobao was already extremely dangerous, and it definitely couldn't happen a second time. However, with their current situation, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to condense a divine body. Dugumobao was silent for a moment and said, "I'll take care of it." 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Liwei looked at the heavenly square medicine cauldron that was once again filled with flying ash and sighed helplessly. "I failed again." This was already the 4th time she had failed. During these few times of refining pills, she had always been very cautious and careful, and every time she would seriously learn from the previous failure. However, it was useless. The result was still failure every time. Even this time she herself felt that there should be no problem. Lines had even begun to appear on the pill, but it was always a little short. "Where exactly is the difference?" Chu Liwei crossed her arms and rested her chin on one hand. She stared at the heavenly square medicine cauldron in front of her with a solemn gaze. The process of refining pills these few times kept replaying in her mind. She thought about it bit by bit, but she still didn't know where the problem was. After such a long time of high concentration, her mind and strength were consumed extremely quickly. She gently rubbed her temples. Rong Xiu said, "Take a rest first." Chu Liwei nodded. It wasn't a solution to continue like this. If she didn't have enough energy, the result would be the same even if she tried countless times. Of course, more importantly, the medicinal herbs she had were only enough for her to refine one more time. If she used them up, she would have to go back. But she didn't plan to leave the Red Moon Desert now. She walked to Rong Xiu's side and set up a barrier to isolate the terrifying heat. Then she began to cultivate quietly. Rong Xiu let Shui Shui out. Go play by yourself. Roar. Xue Xue let out a joyous howl before her snow-white sturdy figure quickly disappeared from their sight. Those people were all resting now and no one cared about it. Kid be free now. When Chu Liwei heard the commotion she thought of something and asked in her heart, Dumpling Zichen, do you want to come out for a walk? Although the cultivation environment here could not be compared to that of the Peach Blossom Cove and the Yuntian Tower, it had the advantage of being spacious and sparsely populated. Sure enough, right after he asked, Dumpling immediately raised her hand excitedly. Ayu, I want to go out. She had swallowed too much Tianlei some time ago. Now that she had all the strength in her body she didn't know where to use it. Chu Liwei smiled and released Dumpling. Go. Remember to come back when you're done playing. Dumpling happily pounced on her. Just as she was about to kiss her she suddenly felt a chill at the back of her head. She quickly looked up and met Rong Xiu's indifferent eyes. Dumpling chuckled and squeezed out a big smile. She obediently stopped what she was doing and changed to a flying kiss. Ayu. Then I'll go now. Chu Liwei pinched her chubby little face. Got it. Just don't go too crazy. Dumpling nodded vigorously. Just as she was about to turn and leave she suddenly thought of something. She rolled her eyes and smiled. Zichen, this is a rare opportunity. Why don't we have a fight? Not long after she finished speaking, Zichen's figure slowly appeared. There was still no expression on his handsome and cold face. Okay. Chu Liwei looked at him in surprise. Strange. Zichen had never been interested in these things. She didn't know what had happened to him today. Why did he agree to fight with Tuanzi? Perhaps it was because he felt that there were no outsiders here so he was more relaxed? Dumpling didn't think so much. When she saw Zichen agree so readily, her eyes lit up with excitement and she rubbed her palms together. If you lose, you have to acknowledge me as your big sister. She still clearly remembered that she had been suppressed by him in the wind separation cave. Today she had to get it back no matter what. Chu Liwei held his forehead helplessly. It had been so long, but this girl still remembered the big sister thing. She was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and had the most noble and purest bloodline. Countless demonic beasts in the world would follow her lead. But she still wanted to be Zichen's big sister. If Zichen was just an ordinary three-eyed eagle, there would be no need to fight. But the key was that Zichen had a part of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline flowing in his body. He was connected to Mao Zhen's bloodline and aura. If Dumpling fought against him, wouldn't it be equivalent to fighting against Mao Zhen? But the great Phoenix Dragon clan had always been on equal footing with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. No matter what, Zichen wouldn't admit defeat easily. These two would probably have a conflict in the future. Zichen looked at Dumpling condescendingly and said indifferently, "It's not too late to talk about it when you can do it." Dumpling snorted softly. With a tap of her toes, she transformed into a ball of reddish gold flames and flew out quickly. Zichen cupped his hands respectfully at Chu Liwei before following her unhurriedly. The two figures quickly disappeared from sight. Chu Liwei watched them leave and only retracted her gaze after a while. She wasn't worried about their safety. After all, this was Daoist territory. Usually no one would come here. Even if they really caused trouble it shouldn't be a problem. After resting for a while, Chu Liwei felt that she had finally adjusted her condition and planned to try one last time. If it still didn't work this time, she would have to think of another way. Chu Liwei stood up and clapped her hands to shake off the sand on her body. Suddenly the ground trembled. Chu Liwei paused. The sand under her feet began to flow at an astonishing speed. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2098. Chu Liwei immediately became alert. What's going on? With her as the center, the sand was flowing towards the surroundings. Soon, the ground beneath her feet caved in, and Chu Liue's body uncontrollably fell downwards. She felt that something was amiss, so she took a deep breath and flew to the side. However, just as her feet landed on the sand dune, the same thing happened again. The sand in the previous position suddenly stopped moving, and the sand under her feet flowed towards the surroundings again. Chu Liwei felt uneasy. She changed 2 more positions and found that it was the same. The coarse sand seemed to be attracted by some kind of power, forming a strange whirlpool on the ground. No matter where she went, the whirlpool would follow her. Rong Xiu frowned slightly and in a flash he came to Chu Liue's side. His long arm wrapped around her slender waist. Then a golden flame gushed out from his other hand. The flame quickly formed a boundary, sealing the whirlpool below. Chu Liyue stood in the air looking down at the situation below. Under the golden flame's seal, the sand no longer flowed outwards, and the whirlpool gradually dissipated. In just a moment, everything returned to its original state. Xiao landed on the ground again with her. This time the whirlpool did not appear again. It was as if what happened just now was just an illusion. However, Chu Liyue knew that it was not so. Su Li quickly went forward and asked, Are you okay? Chu Liyue shook her head gently. Only a few whirlpools appeared and she did not feel any threat. However, this was obviously not normal. What happened just now? Su Li furrowed her brows and looked at the burning golden flame. Xiao raised his finger and the flame quickly flew back. Facing Su Li's question, Chu Liyue fell into silence and then shook her head gently. I don't know either. It wasn't her first time in the Red Moon Desert, but she had never encountered such a situation. She looked at Xiao. Did you feel something? Xiao reacted very quickly. Before she could figure out what was going on, Xiao had already made his move. She couldn't help but feel that perhaps Xiao had sensed something. Xiao squinted his eyes and they were deep. He shook his head slightly. No. I just felt that there was something wrong with the situation. There seemed to be some strange power surging below. But as soon as I made my move, all the fluctuations and aura dissipated. I don't know what it is exactly. Chu Liyue pursed his lips. Xiao's strength was above hers, so it was normal for him to sense the danger before her. If even he said so, then it would be really difficult to know what was down there. Maybe I should ask Dabao and the rest. Thinking of this, she was suddenly startled. Why didn't Dabao and the rest come out when such a strange situation was discovered in the Red Moon Desert? As soon as this thought appeared, a familiar voice sounded in her ears. Little you It was Dabao. Chu Liyue turned around but found that Dabao didn't appear. From the corner of her eyes, Su Li's expression didn't change, but Xiao hugged her waist tightly. It seemed that only the two of them could hear Dabao's voice. Chu Liyue suppressed the fluctuations in her heart and listened quietly. What happened just now was just an accident. You don't have to take it to heart. Chu Liyue's lips moved. She didn't think it was an accident, but since Dabao said so, she naturally didn't ask any more. You can continue to refine medicine at ease. Here no one can hurt you. Dabao's voice was indifferent, but it carried a powerful aura and pressure that couldn't be disobeyed. Chu Liyue felt a little relieved. The corners of her lips curled up slightly and she nodded gently. She knew that Dabao would definitely know her response. Sure enough, Dabao's voice disappeared after that. The desert seemed to have returned to its usual calmness. Chu Liyue and Xiao looked at each other, then looked at Su Li and comforted her. Mr. Su, don't worry. It's not a big deal. Su Li saw that her expression seemed to be much more relaxed, and her heart also calmed down a little. But when she thought of the scene just now, she still felt a little strange. Skid. This kind of situation shouldn't happen again, right? Chu Liyue paused. It shouldn't happen again. Actually, she wasn't sure, but since Dabao said so, she shouldn't be too worried, right? She let out a long breath and walked towards the heavenly square cauldron. Anyway, she had rested enough, so she might as well try again. Perhaps she could succeed this time. She stood in front of the heavenly square cauldron and placed one hand on it. She was about to take action when she suddenly hesitated for a moment. A reddish gold flame gushed out from her palm and poured into the heavenly square cauldron. Looking down from above, a transparent flame was burning in the middle of the cauldron. The outer circle was surrounded by reddish gold flames. As Dumpling continued to open her meridians, her strength continued to increase. The flame that Chu Liyue could summon also became more powerful day by day. In the past, it could barely compete with the transparent karmic fire. But now it was faintly showing signs of catching up. Chu Liyue recalled the few times she had refined pills just now. There were no problems in the beginning, but several times she failed at the last step of condensing the pills. She had a bold idea in her heart, but she didn't know if it would work. Thinking of this, she held her breath and concentrated. Then she put the herbs in one by one. With the previous experience, she was now handling these herbs with greater ease. Her series of actions could be said to be like moving clouds and flowing water. Su Li watched from the side and couldn't help but praise. I thought that her first refinement was already outstanding enough. I didn't expect her to be able to do even better. Every time Chu Liyue refined pills, there was an obvious improvement compared to the previous one. This time, from a bystander's point of view, it was even more pleasing to the eye. It was said that celestial physician emphasized talent. Now it seemed that it was true. At the beginning it was obvious that Chu Liyue's actions were still a little jerky. But after a few times her proficiency and sensitivity had almost surpassed all the physicians that Suli had seen before. Some celestial physician might not be able to do what she did in their lifetime. This could only be explained by the word, talent. When Rong Xiu heard this, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. An extremely faint smile flashed across the corner of his eyes. But this smile quickly disappeared. His gaze silently fell on the spot where the vortex had disappeared, and a frosty look flashed across his eyes. At the same time, the hearts of the three people under the lake were in suspense. Diwu Zhangzi frowned and looked at Dugu Mobao with a worried expression. Dabao, isn't the dangerous month already over? Why did that happen again just now? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2099. Dugu Mobao's face darkened as he closed his eyes. I don't know either. Logically speaking, that thing shouldn't have appeared at this time. Maybe it's because the dangerous moon lasted for too long this time, so there's still some influence left. But we've already eliminated all those forces previously. Why is it still like this? Diwu Zhangzi was still confused. Dugu Mobao fell silent. Lan Shao, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly snorted. 10,000 years have passed. No matter how strong the seal is, there will be signs of loosening. Besides, didn't Ling Shao college already? He didn't finish his sentence, but the other two knew what he meant. He raised his eyebrows and lay back down. Anyway, the following days won't be peaceful. The dark and cramped cage fell into a long silence. The air seemed to have frozen, cold and stagnant. After a long while, Diwu Zhangzi said, no matter what, luckily, Dabao acted in time and you didn't notice anything. The moment before Rong Xiu acted, Dabao was already one step ahead. Dugu Mobao shook his head. She's always been smart and definitely wouldn't be unaware. Especially today's incident, which was too sudden and strange. She'll definitely be suspicious. She came here this time to help Lan Shao and Diwu Zhangzi recover their divine bodies. Naturally, she would be more cautious when faced with such a situation. Lan Shao said lazily, she'll know sooner or later. Don't tell me you think you can hide it from her forever? Dugu Mobao was silent for a moment. At the very least, we have to wait until she becomes a venerable god. A day passed. Chu Liyue put the last ingredient into the heavenly square cauldron. She stared at it and carefully controlled the flame. When all the medicinal effects started to merge, she made up her mind. Condense. The transparent karmic fire surrounded the center, and a fist-sized pill quickly condensed. Immediately after, Chu Liyue quickly activated the force in her body and controlled the reddish-gold flames to surge up and completely surround the pill. As the reddish-gold flames spread, the first pattern appeared on the elixir pill. Chu Liyue was delighted, but he still didn't dare to be careless. That was because there was a time before when vein patterns had already begun to appear on the pill, but he still failed in the end. She didn't dare to relax until the very last moment. As the two layers of flames burned, the pill gradually shrank. Not long after, the second pattern appeared on it. The origin power in Chu Liyue's body was rapidly depleting. At this moment she couldn't help but rejoice that she had enough origin power stored in her body. Otherwise, if this trend continued, it would be very difficult for him to last until the end. Suli watched from the side and clenched her fists nervously. The previous few times he had not been able to hold on to this stage. Maybe. I'm really going to succeed this time. While Chu Liyue was concentrating on refining the soul-consolidating pill, Dumpling and Zichen had already started. Boom. A reddish-gold fireball flew out and went straight for Zichen's face. His handsome and cold face was calm as usual. With a slight tilt of his body, he dodged the fireball. Bang! The fireball ran all the way and directly hit a sand dune. In an instant, sand and dust flew everywhere. At the same time, a howl suddenly sounded. Roar! A snow-white figure jumped up from behind the sand dune. A few scattered flames were still burning on its buttocks. Shwe shwe. Dumpling was stunned and widened her grape-like eyes. Why are you here too? Shwe shwe frantically rolled around in the sand, trying to extinguish the flames. However, the flames were too powerful and this method didn't work at all. In the end, Xianxia directly froze its entire body to barely extinguish the flames. Sensing that the burning sensation had finally disappeared, Xianxia shook its body and shook off the layer of blue ice around it. It turned around and looked at its butt and was instantly enraged. His originally round and chubby buttocks were actually burnt black in several places. The charred fur around it was still wrapped in fine ice shards. It looked very pitiful. Xianxia trembled. Ow ow. What did she mean by it was here too? It was clearly here first, okay? It was just tired from running one round and found a place to rest, slack off and enjoy a carefree life. Who knew that just as it fell asleep, its butt would be burned by a ball of fire? Dumpling tiptoed and saw Xianxia's pitiful appearance. She immediately stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. Ahem, Xianxia, I really didn't do it on purpose. Don't be angry. Look, you're so powerful. These superficial injuries aren't very serious to you. You'll definitely recover after a period of rest, right? Xianxia looked at the culprit with grief and indignation. Its face was full of complaints. Its fur. It took so much effort to take care of it. It would take a long time for it to grow back. It thought that it wouldn't have to go back in such a sorry state after coming to the Red Moon Desert this time. Who knew that an even fiercer one would come? Xianxia almost fainted when it thought about how it would have to look like this for a long time. How would it survive in the future? Dumpling looked at it and felt very embarrassed. So she put one hand on her waist and pointed at Xichen with the other. Look. Just now it was because you dodged too quickly that Xianxia suffered. If you didn't dodge, it wouldn't be like this now. Zichen's brows moved slightly. Since we're fighting, it's normal for me to dodge. If there was anyone to blame, they could only blame Dumpling for attacking too quickly or Xianxia for reacting too slowly. Dumpling snorted. You're still talking about it. We've been fighting for so long. I've always been the one attacking and you've always dodged. You've never taken the initiative to attack. This fight is boring. Xianxia, ow. Weren't we discussing compensation for me? Why are you talking about your fight again? Even if both of you have the bloodline of ancient divine beasts, you can't treat other divine beasts as beasts like that. Zichen said calmly. You haven't used your full strength, so I naturally won't attack. In other words, Dumpling could only barely exchange blows with him if she tried her best. Dumpling gasped when she heard that. Just you wait, I'll show you the power of your big sister. Bam. Bam. 2 balls of reddish gold flames gushed out of her eyes. A shocking aura erupted from her body. Zichen narrowed his eyes and spread his feet apart. He put one hand behind his back and raised the other hand slightly, accumulating strength. Xianxia? Are they going to fight again? What about me? Xianxia, wait for me to subdue him and make him apologize to you. As Dumpling spoke, she clasped her hands together. The flames around her kept gathering and finally condensed into a reddish gold feather. Go. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2100. As soon as he finished speaking, the golden feather flew out rapidly. It went straight for Zichen. At the same time, a purplish gold stream of light emanated from Zichen's palm and covered his entire hand in the blink of an eye. At first glance, it looked like it was covered in a layer of purplish gold scale armor. A suppressive aura that was not inferior to Dumpling's was emitted from his body. Zichen's body had fused with the great phoenix dragon's bloodline power. Moreover, he had Mao Zhen's support. Once he made a move, it would naturally be extraordinary. He raised his hand abruptly and moved, heading straight for the golden feather. It looked like he really intended to fight head-on. In the blink of an eye, the golden feather had already flown in front of Zichen. The surrounding space was almost torn apart by the astonishing power of the golden feather. Zichen clenched his hand into a fist and punched out violently. Boom. The two forces collided fiercely. Following this loud sound, the violent and vigorous forces began to fight wildly, and the aftershocks continued to spread to the surroundings. Two extremely intense and bright colors intertwined rapidly in mid-air, dazzling everyone's eyes. The sand on the ground was affected and flew into the air. Xianxia, who was left to the side, did not have time to react before it ate another mouthful of sand. Its snow-white ball was finally covered by a layer of yellow sand. Xianxia slowly lowered its head and looked at its dirty appearance. It could not help but grind its teeth. These two people were really going too far. Unfortunately, its reaction did not attract the attention of the two people on the other side. Tuanzi looked at him with bright eyes and her heart was thumping excitedly. Zichen was finally willing to make a move. Previously at the Peach Blossom Dock, Zichen's strength was slightly higher than hers. Therefore she was not convinced and always wanted to find an opportunity to compete with him. Moreover, now that she had broken through to the 5th meridian, her chances of winning were even higher. Naturally, she could not miss this opportunity. As the two forces continued to clash, the golden feather was gradually worn down, and the purplish gold scale armor on Zichen's fist also began to fade gradually. They were almost evenly matched. Seeing this, Dumpling hurriedly threw out another flame. Zichen looked up slightly and a black feather also flew out. Bang! Dumpling's reinforcements were intercepted halfway. She was stunned for a moment, then an even stronger fighting spirit surged within her. So this was Zichen's real strength. That's great. Only then would the fight be interesting. However, just as she was about to continue attacking, she suddenly heard a subtle and strange sound. There seems to be a sound under the sand? Tuanzi was stunned and looked at the ground. Only then did she see that the sand seemed to be flowing towards the surroundings at an extraordinary speed. She took a step forward curiously. Zichen's pupils shrank. Careful. But it was too late. Just as Dumpling's foot landed, a vortex suddenly appeared below her. An extremely strange force surged up from below, entangling her feet and pulling her down. The next moment, Dumpling's figure disappeared from the spot. Zichen immediately retracted his hand. The force backfired, causing his qi and blood to surge. However, before he had time to think about this, he chased after Dumpling and jumped into the vortex. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were swallowed up one after another. Shui realized something and immediately jumped up to look down from above. Under the vortex there was a thick darkness. It was like an eye coldly looking at the world. Digression. 6 o'clock. Remember the mobile version of the website. Chapter 2101. In the heavenly square cauldron, the reddish gold flame was burning fiercely. A crimson elixir was floating quietly. The last line was slowly being drawn. Chu Liuyue's forehead was constantly sweating, but before it could fall, it had been evaporated by the high temperature of the flame. Because she had used up too much energy, her lips were pale without a trace of blood. At this time the passage of time seemed to be particularly slow. The sky gradually darkened and the cold wind swept from the depths of the desert, brushing past her body, and the chill seeped into her bones. In front of her was the hot fire and behind her was the cold wind. Waves of weakness came from her body. Chu Liyue secretly bit the tip of her tongue, and a sweet and fishy taste spread between her lips and teeth. The sharp stabbing pain kept her extremely clear-headed. At this time the last line on the elixir finally appeared completely. An extremely rich medicinal fragrance burst out from the cauldron. Chu Liyue slapped the cauldron with her palm. The soul-concentrating elixir flew up in an instant. The reddish gold flame gradually peeled off, followed by the transparent karmic fire. When the last bit of fire dissipated, Chu Liyue jumped up, and her aura swept across, and put the soul-concentrating elixir into the jade box that had been prepared long ago. Bang! The jade box was closed and Chu Liyue fell back to the ground. She looked at the jade box in her hand and could vaguely feel the fluctuations of the elixir inside. Soul-concentrating elixir. An elixir at the level of a grand doctor. The success of this elixir meant that she had officially stepped into the threshold of a grand doctor. The rich medicinal fragrance in the air did not dissipate for a long time. Chu Liyue's heart beat quickly and the blood in her body seemed to be boiling. She raised the jade box in her hand, turned her head and smiled brightly at Rongxiu and Su Li who were standing not far away. It's done. At this time the night was dark and there were no stars or moon in the black velvet night sky. Beside her, in the transparent cauldron, a strong and bright flame was burning silently. The sparkling flame fell on her face, which was like a good porcelain jade. A pair of obsidian-like eyes were bright, and her red lips were raised in a bright smile. Congratulations you, Rongxiu's thin scarlet lips were slightly raised, and there was undisguised appreciation in his eyes. Although he already knew that she would succeed, he still felt happy when he saw her happy expression. Su Li also gave him a thumbs up and sighed sincerely. You are truly amazing. Without any preparation, he directly used this opportunity to break through to the rank of Grand Physician. From the first time she tried to refine the soul concentrating pill until now, it had only been over 10 days and she had only failed 4 times in between. If this news were to spread, it was unknown how many people would be envious, jealous and hateful. Chu Luiyue put away the cauldron. She thought for a moment and said, "Actually, although the level of this soul concentrating pill is quite high, it isn't too troublesome to refine." Being able to succeed this time was also due to some luck. Su Li was speechless. Isn't this troublesome? Even until now she still couldn't remember the order in which the herbs were put in. Chu Liwei smiled and nodded. Yes. The soul concentrating pill had a lot of herbs, but the refining technique was actually very simple. Among the prescriptions she had seen, it could only be ranked in the middle. Rong Xiu's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, but he didn't speak. He had long noticed that Chu Liyue's understanding of these prescriptions was a little skewed, and now it seemed that it was true. The soul concentrating pill could be regarded as a very precious medicinal pill among the Grand Physician level. No matter from which aspect, it was definitely not simple. Even those experienced Grand Physicians, if it was their first time refining the soul concentrating pill, they would rarely succeed in such a short period of time. But now there was obviously no need to say these words to her. Chu Liyue didn't notice the slight change in expression on Rong Xiu's face, and looked at Su Li with a smile. "Mr. Su, with the soul concentrating pill, it will be much easier to help you reconstruct your body. You just need to find a suitable skeleton of a 9th-stage martial artist and you can..." Suddenly her expression changed and she quickly turned her head and looked into the depths of the desert. Almost at the same time, Rong Xiu's eyes also sharpened. Seeing this, Su Li's heart instantly surged with an ominous premonition. "What's wrong?" Chu Liyue didn't speak, but her brows were tightly knitted. Just now she lost contact with Dumpling and Zichen. No matter how she called in her heart, she could no longer receive any news from the two at this time. Since she contracted with Dumpling and Zichen, this was the first time such a situation had happened. Chu Liyue felt a chill on her back. After the magical beast and the human race contracted, they were connected to each other. Even if they were thousands of miles apart, they could still sense each other's existence. But now, it seemed that there was an extremely sharp knife that cut off the invisible connection between them. It was clearly fine just now. At this moment, Rong Xiu suddenly held her hand. His palm was warm and dry, and he held her hand tightly with strength and gentleness. Obviously, he had already sensed Chu Liyue's nervousness. The ironing warmth surged from his palms, bringing with it a reassuring strength. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and said word by word, "Dumpling and Zichen. I can't contact them." Rong Xiu's brows moved slightly, and he immediately understood Chu Liyue's meaning. He gently squeezed her hand and said, "Don't worry. This is the Red Moon Desert, they won't get lost." Chu Liyue nodded. If they really couldn't find them, they could only ask Debao and the others for help. Swoosh. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air came from afar. The few of them looked up and saw a yellow and white figure running towards them at high speed. It was Shueshue. When it came close, Chu Liyue saw Shueshue's appearance clearly, and her expression changed. Its white and fluffy hair was covered with a layer of yellow sand. It looked dirty and some parts were even knotted. But this wasn't the most important thing. Because there were several black burn marks on Shueshue's butt. "Shueshue, you..." Just as Chu Liyue was about to ask, Shueshue quickly pounced over and bit the corner of her skirt. As it pulled, it let out a low whimper. Chu Liyue suddenly realized something. "Where are you taking me?" "Wait, your injury was caused by Dumpling?" That aura was simply too familiar. Shueshue nodded frantically and was still pulling desperately. Rong Xiu suddenly said, "It knows where Dumpling and Zichen are." Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. "Really?" Rong Xiu nodded slightly and looked at Shueshue. "Just lead the way." "Ow!" Shueshue responded and turned to run forward. Chu Liyue asked Su Li to return to the heavenly square cauldron, and then chased after Shueshue with Rong Xiu. The cold night wind brushed past their faces. Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu ran at full speed, and the two figures quickly disappeared into the thick night. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2102. Shueshue was as fast as lightning. Although it was accidentally burned by Dumpling, it was only a flesh wound and was not serious. Under its lead, Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu rushed into the depths of the desert. On the other side, Dugumabao and the other two had already realized that something was wrong when Dumpling and Zichen were swallowed by the vortex. Why isn't it over yet? Diwu Xianxia couldn't help but curse. First they tried to attack Yue. Seeing that it didn't work, they changed their target to Dumpling. Now even Zichen is implicated. Dabao, you didn't attack just now? Dugumabao originally had its eyes closed, but after hearing that, it suddenly coughed a few times and blood flowed from its lips. Diwu Xianxia and Lan Zhao's expressions changed. They had already fought. Dabao. You. Dugumabao slowly opened his eyes. A dark glint seemed to flash across his eyes before disappearing in an instant. He raised his hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, and his eyes drooped slightly. The bright red color on the back of his hand deeply stimulated his eyes. I couldn't stop it. He had just gone through a dangerous month and he was in a very weak state, so he couldn't use all his strength. As for the thing below, it was the opposite. In actual fact, ever since he noticed that the thing wanted to attack Chu Liyue, he had been on tenterhooks and had maintained his guard up. When Dumpling was in danger, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, he still couldn't stop it. Diwu Xianxia and Lan Xiao fell into silence. Dugumabao was the strongest among the three, and he was also the only one with a divine body. If even he said that, then, however, although I couldn't stop it, that thing is also injured. It should be obedient for a while. Dugumabao's words didn't make them feel at ease. That's Yuer's contracted fiend. Lan Xiao leaned against the wall and covered his face with one hand as he said slowly, "Don't worry. She won't let it go. If I had known earlier, I would have warned her. That thing has been plotting for a long time. Now that it finally has the chance, it naturally won't let it go." Dugumabao's expression was cold. Don't forget, Dumpling is a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and she has the purest bloodline. Even if it didn't happen this time, there will be a next time. Diwu Xianxia sighed. It's true. But what should we do now? Lan Xiao and I are unable to leave this place in a short period of time. Only you can help you, Actually, Dugumabao's current situation wasn't optimistic. If it wasn't for him, Lan Zhao's life would have been in danger. He himself was also severely injured. Dugumabao slowly clenched his fists. Now that things have come to this, it's too late to stop them. Originally, he had planned to wait for her to break through to the Supreme God level. However, now that Dumpling and Zichen had disappeared together, she would not leave so easily. Furthermore, the agreement back then clearly stated that we were not to confront that thing head-on. Once one party takes the initiative to break this agreement, the other party will be able to kill them completely. Now is definitely not the time to fall out with them. He said. Let's wait and see first. Under Shue's lead, Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu quickly arrived at the place. When she saw the whirlpool above the desert, Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. This was almost exactly the same as the whirlpool that had appeared under her feet previously. It was just that this one looked bigger and deeper. Although they were still a short distance away from the whirlpool, Chu Liyue could already feel a cold and sinister aura slowly spreading out from inside. An invisible pressure enveloped the entire area, making it almost impossible to breathe. A thought instantly appeared in Chu Liyue's mind. This place is extremely dangerous. Shui stopped and whimpered softly. Chu Liyue immediately understood what it meant. You're saying that Dumpling and Zichen have both entered this place? Shui nodded vigorously. Chu Liyue took a few more steps forward. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing in the air above the whirlpool. She instinctively felt that if she went any further, it would be extremely dangerous. However, she could still clearly see the situation below from here. A whirlpool had appeared above the vast and boundless desert. Sand constantly gushed out from below and surged in all directions. The entire whirlpool was slowly rotating in an anti-clockwise direction. The deepest part of the whirlpool was pitch black. For some reason, the moment Chu Liyue looked down, she inexplicably felt as if she was being stared at by a pair of eyes. Cold, indifferent, evil, greedy and crazy. Chu Liyue's heart instantly felt as if it was being gripped tightly by something. At this moment, a familiar feeling came to her heart. Suddenly her eyes widened. She remembered now. This aura was exactly the same as the hand buried under Lingxiao College's mountain of wine. Peach Blossom Cove. The night was hazy. The pitch-black room was completely silent. Suddenly, Psini opened his eyes and quickly stood up. He picked up his clothes from the side and put them on before quickly walking out. The moment he opened the door, 13, who was sleeping next to him, heard the commotion. He also got up and poked his head out to look over. "Big brother, what's wrong?" Sun-yi did not look at him. He said indifferently, "Go back and stay here." He hurriedly left as he spoke. 13 nodded and watched as Sun-yi quickly left. He could not help but frown. Big brother seems to be in a hurry. What is he going to do? Sun-yi walked out of the courtyard. He had just turned a corner when he bumped into someone. It was Chang Wanzhou. He blocked Sun-yi's path. "Where are you going?" "Wonderful Book House." Chapter 2103. Sun-yi glanced at him. "Naturally, I'm going where I should go." Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips. "I'll go with you." Sun-yi's eyes flickered as he carefully sized up Chang Wanzhou. He became alert. "What do you know?" Not many people knew that there was trouble on his master's side. Judging from Chang Wanzhou's appearance, not only did he know something, he didn't come later than him. Chang Wanzhou was silent for a moment. "I don't know. I just felt uneasy and happened to see you come out." Sun-yi narrowed his eyes slightly as he scrutinized Chang Wanzhou with his long, narrow and indifferent eyes. Chang Wanzhou met his gaze calmly. What he said just now was indeed true. For some reason he felt that something was going to happen tonight. He had planned to come out for a walk, but he happened to bump into Sun-yi. Now Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu weren't in Peach Blossom Cove. Everything was basically handed over to Sun-yi. Something was clearly wrong for him to suddenly come out in such a hurry. There was no need to guess. It was definitely related to Chu Luiyue. After a brief standoff, Sun-yi stepped forward and swept past Chang Wanzhou. "You're not qualified." He was saying that Chang Wanzhou wasn't strong enough. His tone was as calm and cold as usual, but it was precisely because of this that his words were especially sharp. Chang Wanzhou stepped forward again and stopped him. His soft golden hair fell down, covering his eyes and brows. It was almost impossible to tell under the night sky. He enunciated each word clearly. "How do you know that I'm not qualified?" Sun-yi couldn't be bothered with him. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he suddenly saw a totem faintly discernible between Chang Wanzhou's brows. He stopped in his tracks. A rare look of shock appeared on his usually expressionless face. "You..." Chang Wanzhou retracted his aura and the totem quickly disappeared. "Are you qualified now?" Phoenix God Mountain. The Phoenix Shrine was brightly lit. The door of the temple was shut tight and there was silence all around. Only Elder Yu was standing at the bottom of the steps in front of the door. He would look at the sky from time to time, then look at the Phoenix Shrine as if he was waiting for something. His face carried a hint of nervousness. After a long time, the door of the temple opened and a figure walked out. It was Yizhao. Patriarch. Elder Yu hurriedly went forward. "How is it?" Yizhao shook his head. "Not yet." A look of disappointment appeared in Elder Yu's eyes, but it quickly dissipated as he consoled. "This matter is extremely difficult to begin with. Our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has existed for so many years, and there are very few who have been able to open the 8th meridian. But now that you've touched the threshold, you still have a very high chance of success. If it doesn't work this time, maybe next time." If anyone else was here, they would definitely be shocked to hear this. Because the 8th meridian belonged to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, a legendary level. In all these years, no more than 3 people in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had succeeded. Yizhao had spent most of his time in the Phoenix Shrine, and everyone in the clan thought that he was just cultivating as usual. After all, he spent most of his time here as well. Other than Elder Yu, no one knew that he was actually trying to open the 8th meridian. But the result was unsatisfactory, and after some effort he still failed. Hearing Elder Yu's words, Yizhao waved his hand carelessly. "I know all this. As the Patriarch and also the strongest existence in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan closest to opening the 8th meridian, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to cross this threshold. From the day he became the Patriarch until today, he had stayed in the 7th meridian for far too long. Actually, he didn't have much hope in this matter, but for some reason he vaguely felt that he seemed to have grasped the knack of it, so he was tempted. Naturally, it would be best if he could succeed. If he couldn't, he would have a clear conscience even if he tried his best. At this level, what was needed was not just hard work but also talent and opportunity. Therefore, Yizhao was very open-minded about this matter. Seeing Yi Zhao like this, Elder Yu also heaved a sigh of relief. But it would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it. If Yi Zhao could really open the 8th meridian, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan would be greatly encouraged. How is Dumpling recently? Yi Zhao asked. Elder Yu gathered his thoughts, and when he mentioned Dumpling he couldn't help but smile. I heard that some time ago in the battle between Shangguan and Yi Wentao was defeated miserably. Dumpling also successfully opened her 5th meridian after that battle. This news had been spreading like wildfire in the entire Divine Ruins world recently, and it was hard not to know. However, Yi Zhao had been in seclusion recently, so he didn't know. When he heard this, Yi Zhao was both surprised and delighted. Really? So fast? It hadn't been long since Dumpling opened her 3rd meridian at Phoenix Godly Mountain. Yi Zhao originally thought that Dumpling would only be able to open her 5th meridian after a few more years. Unexpectedly, of course it's true. Shangguan is very powerful now, and it complements Dumpling. They are both successful. Yi Zhao was full of smiles and he was rather emotional. Speaking of which, Ancestor really had a discerning eye. Back then we didn't agree with Dumpling continuing to follow Shangguan, but Ancestor insisted. Who would have thought that this day would come? After hearing about the recent events, Yu couldn't help but sigh. Dumpling following that woman was indeed the right choice. A faint smile appeared on Yi Zhao's usually cold and dignified face. Although it was just a flash, it was extremely rare. Ancestor has great foresight and Dumpling is also very smart. There are so many cultivators in the world, but it chose the best one at a glance. As expected of the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. His words were filled with pride. Elder Yu silently glanced at him, too embarrassed to remind him. Who was the one who didn't agree to Dumpling forming a contract with Shangguan and even threatened her? As Yi Zhao spoke, he changed the topic. However, Shangguan, previously she said that she would bring Dumpling back to visit when she has time. It's been so long, so why haven't we heard anything? Yu hurriedly said. Didn't they just occupy Peach Blossom Dock a while ago? They should be the busiest during this period of time. They will probably come back when everything is on the right track. Dumpling must miss us a lot, right? Speaking of this, Yi Zhao's expression softened. After pondering for a long time, he sighed softly. Dumpling has the purest bloodline and is extremely talented. He is also very smart. Opening the 8th meridian is extremely difficult for the rest of the clan, but it might be within reach for her. She might even be able to reach the peak in the future. Suddenly his expression changed. Oh no. Something happened to Dumpling. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2104. Elder Yu was also shocked when he heard this. Patriarch, what's wrong? Yi Zhao frowned. Dumpling's aura is gone. Ever since the incident in the God-slaying tomb, he had a lingering fear in his heart. He had purposely left a way to connect with Dumpling's aura. But now the connection was suddenly broken. Elder Yu's heart sank. How could this be? Shouldn't Dumpling be at the Yuntian Tower with Shangguan and the others? Some time ago Bailey Jun died. Rong Xiao and Shangguan rushed back to the Yuntian Tower. They haven't heard any other news. If they were at the Yuntian Tower, this wouldn't have happened. Yi Zhao quickly made a judgment in his heart and said decisively. They are definitely not at the Yuntian Tower now. That was Rong Xiao's territory. Chu Luiyue had just taken over the Peach Blossom Dock and was in the limelight. No one would be stupid enough to go to the Yuntian Tower at this time to cause trouble for them. The only explanation was, they had already left the Yuntian Tower. Patriarch, can you confirm the location of Dumpling's aura before it disappeared? Yi Zhao closed his eyes and pondered. Then he opened his eyes and frowned. I can't. The distance is too far. Moreover, he had just come out of seclusion. All his thoughts and attention were focused on opening his meridians. He didn't have time to think about anything else. Then, Elder Yu was also in a dilemma. Yi Zhao thought for a moment and said decisively, you stay in the Yuntian Tower. I will personally go to the Yuntian Tower to find out what happened. Yu knew that the matter was urgent and didn't dare to delay. Yes. But to the public. Tell the public that I am still in seclusion at the Phoenix Temple. In this way no one would suspect anything. Yi Zhao had a lot of thoughts in his mind. Now that Dumpling's situation was unknown, it was better to be careful. It would be bad if they alerted the enemy. After giving a few more instructions, Yi Zhao's figure disappeared from the spot. Yi looked at the Phoenix Shrine again, his thoughts heavy. Hopefully, Dumpling and clan leader would be able to return safely. At the same time, Mao Zhen, who was thousands of miles away, also sensed that something was wrong. After thinking for a long time, Mao Zhen also rushed to the Yuntian Tower under the cover of night. He was indebted to Rong Xiu and Chu Liyue. Now that Zichen's aura had suddenly disappeared, he naturally couldn't sit by and do nothing. Within the Divine Ruins world, undercurrents were surging. However, Chu Liyue, who was in the Red Moon Desert, was unaware of all this. She hovered in the air and looked down at the extremely strange vortex below. Her expression gradually became serious. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at Rong Xiu for a moment. There was no need for words. The two of them already knew what the other was thinking. "I didn't expect to see this scene again here," Chu Liyue muttered softly. She still had a deep impression of the hand at the bottom of the myriad wine mountain. The mysterious existence under the vortex should be from the same sect as that hand, but there were some differences. She had wondered more than once what kind of existence could have such a terrifying pressure with just a hand. But she never had an answer. And now this, she slowly clenched her fists. After experiencing that calamity, she knew very well that it was very difficult to fight against it with her own strength. If it wasn't for Dabeo's help at that time, thinking of this, her frown deepened. Along the way she had summoned Dabeo many times, but she never got a response. Now she didn't know how Dabeo and the other two were doing. If Dabeo had suppressed the hand in Lingxiao College back then what about this? Chu Liyue wasn't sure. An indescribable tension and irritation slowly surged from the bottom of her heart. She couldn't help but take a step forward. Suddenly, a cold and deep voice sounded in her ear. "Are you er?" Chu Liyue suddenly came back to her senses and looked at Rong Xiu. In the depths of his deep eyes she could see her tiny figure. And his hand was tightly holding her wrist. Rong Xiu's sword-like eyebrows furrowed slightly. "What were you thinking just now?" Chu Liyue came back to her senses and realized that she had unconsciously taken a step forward. If Rong Xiu hadn't held her back, she probably would have gone straight for the vortex. Her back was suddenly drenched in cold sweat. Just a moment ago she was clearly thinking that this place was extremely dangerous and shouldn't be easily approached. The next moment she actually walked forward uncontrollably. Even someone as vigilant as her was lost for a moment and almost made a mistake. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly. "Step back. I'll go down and take a look." "No." Chu Liyue's first reaction was to refuse. On the one hand, the vortex was full of unknown dangers. On the other hand, Dumpling and Zichen were both her contracted magical beasts. Even if someone had to go down and check it out, it should be her. In all aspects she was the most suitable person. Rong Xiu stepped forward and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. "Be good and listen to me." His words were gentle, but his tone was firm. Chu Liyue looked up in surprise as confusion flashed across her eyes. Rong Xiu's attitude towards this matter had always been very firm. Previously, when they were at Lingxiao College, he wouldn't let her go no matter what. It was the same this time. Although it was dangerous, they had gone through life and death together more than once. Rong Xiu didn't seem to have such a reaction when they encountered other situations in the past. Just as she was thinking, a fierce wind suddenly blew in the desert. Whoosh! The wind whistled and a thin layer of frost quickly condensed on the sand dunes. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly and the wind was bitterly cold. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. The nights in the Red Moon Desert were always extremely cold. But this time it seemed to be a little different. Boom! Suddenly, a roar came from the sky. Chu Liyue immediately looked up and saw a round moon in the originally dark night sky. It was faintly discernible among the layers of dark clouds. The faint moonlight shrouded the entire Red Moon Desert as if it was covered with a layer of white gauze. Then a sharp and strange sound suddenly came from under the desert. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She immediately looked down. An eye suddenly opened. It stared at her from the abyss. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2105. It was indeed an eye. Chu Liyue was shocked. Previously she was only guessing. However, at this moment she clearly saw that huge eye. It was scarlet, bloody and crazy. As if it had been suppressed for thousands of years, it carried deep resentment and coldness. Chu Liyue stared at it in a daze and her mind went blank for a moment. Suddenly, a warm and strong hand covered her eyes, blocking everything in front of her. At the same time she leaned back and fell into a broad and tough chest. A faint, cold fragrance permeated the air and enveloped her entire body, soothing her mind and calming her down. Rongxiu. Chu Luiwei covered Rongxiu's hand with both hands and muttered in a low voice. Did you see it? Rongxiu grunted, turned her around and hugged her tightly in his arms. Don't worry, I'm here. Chu Luiwei leaned in his arms, her forehead on his chest, and her vision was pitch black. She could clearly hear his strong heartbeat. She nodded, but her heart was still surging with waves. That ache was really powerful. It could bewitch people and confuse their minds without batting an eyelid. She thought that she was an extremely resilient person, but she almost fell for it because of her carelessness just now. If not for Rongxiu, she was afraid that I and the hand under the wine mountain belong to the same person, don't they? She asked softly. Rongxiu nodded, one arm wrapped around her slender waist, and his chin rubbed the top of her head a few times. Her hair was soft and smooth, and it also carried the unique cold peach blossom fragrance on her body. Rongxiu looked down. Her hair was tied up in a simple bun and she didn't wear any extra hairpins. Only the peach blossom hairpin shone faintly in her hair. She had been wearing it ever since she got married. Rongxiu retracted his gaze and looked at the vortex below. It should be in existence above her eminence. Chu Luiwei didn't say anything. In fact, she had already guessed this. It wasn't that she hadn't seen Her Eminence before. Even the best of them, Yi Wentao, had been defeated by her. However, the mysterious and powerful existence suppressed below was much more powerful than Her Eminence. And this was only a part of the divine body. Rongxiu patted her shoulder gently and leaned over to her ear. His voice was low and reassuring. Wait for me. As he spoke, he loosened his arm. At the same time, a golden flame flew out from his palm. In the blink of an eye, the fire formed a barrier around Chu Liuyue's body, completely trapping her in it. With a light tap of his slender and fair finger, the golden barrier retreated quite a distance. Until he was sure that she was safe, Rongxiu looked at the vortex again. The patience and gentleness on his face completely disappeared at this moment. A layer of frost quickly climbed up his eyebrows. His deep and unfathomable eyes were even colder and more dignified. He leaped up, and in the next moment he was directly above the vortex. An astonishing force came from below, as if it was going to devour him. Rongxiu's clothes fluttered in the strong wind. The hazy moonlight and the dark night blended together. Dressed in white, he stood in the air, sacred and noble like a banished immortal. However, his body was cold and filled with murderous intent. From afar he looked more like a killing god who had walked out of hell. Chu Liwei stared at him, and for a moment she was in a daze. This Rongxiu was obviously very familiar to her, but there seemed to be some subtle changes and it was a little unfamiliar. In fact, this wasn't the first time she had seen such a scene, and she had felt this way before. She remembered very clearly that when the unparalleled palace chased after Rongxiu and forced him to make a move, he seemed to be like this. It was also at that time that she first knew about Rongxiu's identity as the Holy Sun. At that time she had not recovered her memories, but she had a deep impression of that scene. In the past she did not pay too much attention to it. She only thought that Rongxiu would act like this when he wanted to kill someone. He had always been decisive, cold, and ruthless in killing. Otherwise he would not have been able to obtain the position of the Holy Sun in the Yuntian Tower, nor would he have been able to establish his reputation in the Divine Ruins world, much less reach where he was today. But for some reason Chu Liwei felt a strange feeling in her heart as she looked at him. Suddenly her heart skipped a beat. Rongxiu's current expression was very similar to their reflection in the mirror in front of the Peach Blossom Cove's enchantment. Rongxiu flicked his wrist, and the golden flame quickly turned into a long whip. If one looked closely, they would be able to see the sharp scales and barbs on the whip. Crack! Rongxiu lashed out with the whip. The sound of the whip breaking through the air resounded through the world and spread far and wide. At the same time, the whirlpool suddenly stopped spinning. A sharp and shrill sound came out from it. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. This sound was clearly clearer than the previous one, and it was even more chilling. Immediately after, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth seemed to be attracted by something and rushed over. The ground started to shake as if something was about to rush out from below. A cluster of black flames rose from Rongxiu's eyes. His eyes were cold as he waved his hand again. Crack. Several golden rays flew out quickly and lay in the middle of the whirlpool. These golden rays quickly intertwined and formed a huge net, completely enveloping the whirlpool. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2106. The screeching stopped for a moment and the place fell into a strange silence. However, Chu Liyue's heart still felt like it was being gripped tightly by something. Because the surrounding energy of heaven and earth was still rushing towards this place. The abundant energy was like a surging river, pouring down towards the vortex. It was as if there was something in the depths of the vortex that was crazily devouring everything. The wind whistled. Chu Liyue could still clearly see the scene in front of her through the faint golden barrier in front of her. The ground trembled and the yellow sand flowed. The rustling sound kept echoing in her ears. Suddenly the eye blinked. Boom. The giant golden net dissipated with a loud bang. The violent energy scattered in all directions. Swoosh. A black rope suddenly flew out from below, heading straight for Chu Liyue. Seeing this, Xiu's eyes turned cold, and the golden whip in his hand turned into a ball of fire again. Then he actually crushed it with his bare hands. Bang. Following this loud bang, the ball of fire turned into countless streams of light, and then quickly formed a giant Xian formation in front of Xiu. In the blink of an eye, the incomparably complicated patterns were outlined. As for the black chain, it was also blocked by the Xian formation. As if it had sensed danger, the chain quickly retreated and disappeared into the vortex again. Chu Liyue widened her eyes in shock. So fast. It was definitely not easy to execute such a complicated Xian formation. If it was her, she probably wouldn't even be able to complete it. Suddenly her gaze fixed. This Xian formation looked very familiar. Suddenly a thought flashed in her mind. This was the Xian formation that was used to suppress the Thousand Wine Mountain, the Sky Shuttle formation. How did Xiu execute it? In a flash, the last stream of light finally converged on it. The complete and complicated Xian formation hung in the night sky, rotating quietly and shining brilliantly. An indescribable pressure and aura spread from it. Even Chu Liyue, who was standing far away and separated by a layer of barrier, felt a little stuffy. She gasped in shock. Xiu was actually able to use the formation in such a short time. Could it be that he had already broken through to the Great Grandmaster realm? Without waiting for Chu Liyue to ask in detail, Xiu's figure moved. He leaped up and stepped on the huge golden Xian formation. Boom. Driven by this power, the formation began to descend. This speed seemed slow, but wherever the profound formation passed, large swathes of space would collapse one after another. Everything was quickly destroyed as if it was nothing more than rotten wood. The distance between the Xian formation and the vortex was constantly shortening, and the power of both sides had also started to crazily slaughter each other. However, the profound formation still gradually gained the upper hand and destroyed the power below bit by bit. Finally, the golden array landed on the ground and sealed off the vortex. The surrounding heaven and earth energy no longer surged towards the center, dissipating separately. That shrill shriek was quickly extinguished as well. The yellow sand that had surged out earlier was now flowing back. Chu Liyue stood in the air and saw everything. He was almost in awe. It had only been a short while, but the situation had taken a 180-degree turn. And all of this was because of Xiu. Her gaze turned slightly and landed on Xiu. He stood in midair. After a fierce battle, there wasn't even a speck of dirt on his snow-white robe. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, it would have been hard to believe that he could use the Sky Shuttle formation so easily. One had to know that even the entire Lingxiao College's elders were helpless when they joined forces. If not for Daoist's help, Chu Liyue would definitely not have succeeded. Furthermore, she was only repairing the Sky Shuttle formation at that time. Just this alone almost cost her half her life. No. Xiu completely relied on his own strength to directly use it. A doubt once again welled up in Chu Liyue's heart. How strong was Xiu? She originally thought that after this period of experience she should be able to compete with Xiu. But once the Sky Shuttle formation was used, she understood that there was still a considerable gap between them. She had no idea when he had broken through and there were no signs at all. As if sensing Chu Liyue's gaze, Xiu suddenly turned his head and looked over. A ball of black flame flashed in his eyes. However, because there was a distance between the two of them and Chu Liyue was blocked by the golden barrier in front of her, she could not see this point. Xiu looked back. Under the suppression of the sky shuttle formation, the whirlpool was gradually shrinking, and the movement below was also fading away little by little. His figure moved and he came in front of Chu Liyue. He lifted his wrist slightly and the golden barrier dissipated. Chu Liyue looked at him with a complicated expression, and for a moment she did not know what to say. Seeing the shock in her eyes, Xiu's thoughts moved slightly, but his expression was normal. What's wrong? Chu Liyue opened her mouth and pointed downwards. That's the sky shuttle formation? Xiu nodded. Yes. When did you learn it? Also, this level of Xian formation, how did you? Xiu's thin lips curved slightly and he smiled. When you were repairing the sky shuttle formation, I looked at it for a while. Chu Liyue stared at him in disbelief. This meant that he only looked at it once that day and he learned it? But before it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was incomplete. After it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was quickly used to suppress the Thousand Wine Mountain. The complete sky shuttle formation did not appear for long. It's enough. Xiu's voice was as low and calm as usual, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Chu Liyue choked. Looking at Xiu's calm appearance, she was speechless for a moment. She now vaguely understood how others felt when they looked at her. It was really infuriating to compare oneself to others. At this moment a strange sound came from below. Chu Liyue and Xiu looked up at the same time, and saw that the vortex suddenly began to shrink at an astonishing speed. The surrounding yellow sand kept surging in, as if it was going to be completely flattened. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly sank. Dumpling and Zichen are still down there. She originally thought that Xiu would force the other party to send Dumpling and Zichen out, but she never expected the other party to be so stubborn. Xiu's expression turned cold and he immediately shouted in a deep voice. Explode. Boom. Boom. The power of the sky shuttle formation instantly surged to the center, then condensed into a ball of flame and suddenly exploded. Suddenly the ground shook violently. Yellow sand flew everywhere. A huge pit had appeared beneath the sky shuttle array. It was empty inside. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2107. Chu Liyue had a bad feeling. Almost at the same time Xiu attacked again. On the sky shuttle array several fireballs exploded one after another. Boom. 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 With several earth-shattering explosions, a deep gully appeared in the vast desert. However, under the yellow sand there was still yellow sand. Other than that there was nothing. Xiu frowned. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized that something was wrong. Dumpling and Zichen had probably been swept away by the other party. She moved her feet and went straight down to the gully. Dumpling. Zichen. She shouted as she searched. Gradually her body was enveloped by a chill. The connection between them and her had been forcefully cut off. She couldn't sense their existence at all. The most important thing was that strange and gloomy aura had disappeared without a trace. It was as if the eye in the vortex abyss had never appeared. She stood in the deep gully. Because the flow had stopped, the yellow sand under her feet was covered with frost again. Other than that there was nothing in front or behind her. She clenched her fists and muttered in a low voice, "It ran away just like that." Xiu quickly rushed over and frowned. After checking back and forth a few times he finally said, "It didn't run away. It just hid." Chu Liyue turned to look at him. "Really?" Xiu nodded. Although the sky shuttle array didn't completely kill it, it was still seriously injured. Under such circumstances, it couldn't have escaped. Besides, he paused. Besides, it's very likely that it has been here for a long time. It won't leave so easily. Chu Liyue hesitated at first, but then she remembered the hand at the foot of Lingxiao College's mountain of wine and immediately believed it. What Xiu said was indeed very likely. That thing was very strange. It had probably been suppressed for many years. But, if that's really the case, why did Dabeo and the others ignore it and allow it to exist? Xiu glanced at her darkly. "Did you forget that the thing at the foot of the Thousand Wine Mountain is the same?" Chu Liyue fell silent. "That's right. If Dabao and the others could deal with that thing directly, they would definitely not be merciful. But they didn't. I wonder if there are other difficulties." Moreover, Dabeo and the others had not given any response since Dumpling's disappearance. Thinking of this, Chu Liyue turned and left. "I want to see Dabeo and the others." In this Crimson Moon Desert, the three of them were practically existences that ruled over everything. Chu Liyue did not believe that they were unaware of this. No matter what reason they had for not intervening, she had to personally ask them. It would be best if they could help. If they couldn't, even if she had to flip the entire Crimson Moon Desert over, she would find Dumpling and Zichen. Rong Xiu's lips moved slightly, but he hesitated. He knew her temperament the best. She would never give up easily when she planned to do something. Moreover, everything that happened today had really crossed her bottom line. He stepped forward. I'll be with you. She's coming. She's coming. Diwu Zhangzi was anxious. Dumpling and Zichen are missing. How are we going to explain this? Debao, say something. Dugu Maobao sat cross-legged with no expression on his face. Hearing this, he only frowned slightly and said coldly, noisy. Diwu Zhangzi pointed at his nose in disbelief. I'm noisy? Wasn't I forced to do this? Debao, get it straight. What time is it now? You is here to ask for an explanation. What are you going to do? You pretended to be dead before. You can't be pretending to be dead now, right? Hey. You're not really going to pretend that nothing happened, are you? How can that girl be dealt with so easily? Lan Xiao, who was leaning against the wall, said impatiently, Diwu, can you calm down? You're really noisy. Diwu Zhangzi took a deep breath. Lan Xiao, you're on the same side as Debao now? Lan Xiao sneered and turned over. I can't be bothered. But he's not anxious, so why are you so anxious? Even if Yuer is looking for trouble, it should be his turn first, right? Dugu Maobao was the only one with a divine body among the three of them. Lan Xiao crossed his legs. Even if the sky falls, he should be the first to hold it up. Although he's only a little bit now, it doesn't matter. We're underground. Dugu Maobao glared daggers at him. Lan Xiao didn't care. He was telling the truth. So what? Diwu Zhangzi couldn't be bothered with the two of them. After so many years, they were still as unreliable as ever. Spent a lot of effort on Dumpling and Zichen along the way and doted on them like treasures. Now that something has happened, if she makes a scene, no one can escape. Diwu Zhangzi was so angry that he sat down. Let's see what you're going to do. As soon as he said that, a familiar voice sounded. Debao. It was Chu Liyue. Dugu Maobao's expression changed slightly. Debao. I have something to ask you. If it's convenient, can you meet me? Beside the lake, Chu Liyue looked at the calm lake in front of her and knitted her brows. You, before he could finish, Dugu Maobao appeared in front of him again. Speak. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. You know what happened just now? Dugu Maobao nodded. Yes. Chu Liyue immediately said. Then can you help? No. Dugu Maobao interrupted him. The three of us will definitely not fight him head-on. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2108. In that case, the three of them did know about the existence of the Eye Underground. Why? Chu Liyue took a step forward and asked with a frown. Dugu Maobao looked at her indifferently. There's no reason. But back then at Ling Shao Academy, you were the one who did it, Dugu Maobao said firmly. Chu Liyue was stunned. Only then did she remember that although Debao helped secretly at that time, he did not show up from the beginning to the end. In the Divine Ruins world, he seemed to be unwilling to do anything publicly. He even refused to admit this matter. Her mind raced and then she asked, then, the whereabouts of Dumpling and Zichen, they're still here? Dugu Maobao raised his chin and his expression was slightly serious. All I can tell you is that it can't leave the Red Moon Desert. Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched. That's right. Of course, this was compared to Debao and the other two. Could it be, was it related to that thing that trapped them here? Whether or not you can find Dumpling and Zichen depends on you. As Dugu Maobao spoke, he turned around and was about to leave. After taking a step, he suddenly stopped. I'll be in seclusion during this period of time. Diwu and Lan Xiao will be busy with the divine body and won't come out much. Everything you can do as you see fit. With that, he walked forward. The lake water parted and his figure quickly disappeared. A moment later, the lake water returned to calm. A gentle breeze blew, only causing faint ripples. Chu Liyue stood in place for a long time. At this time, the sky was about to brighten, and a ray of white appeared on the horizon. From afar, the faint layer of frost that had condensed during the night was quietly melting. Quiet and desolate. Rong Xiu walked over, stood beside her and held her hand. Chu Liyue turned around and said, It seems that I can only find them myself. I'll go with you. Fortunately, it won't leave the Red Moon Desert. This is much better than expected. Chu Luiyue heaved a long sigh of relief. Rongxiu glanced at the surface of the lake, which was gradually calming down. Not angry? Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly as she shook her head. How could that be? Actually, De Bao's refusal to help was within her expectations. So when she heard his answer, she was not surprised or dissatisfied. I know how they treat me. Clearly, there was another reason for this. Chu Luiyue had no idea who had trapped De Bao and the other two in the Red Moon Desert. But now she had a vague feeling that she had discovered something. The hand under the Thousand Wine Mountain and the eye under the Red Moon Desert. Obviously, it was related to this. If we can find Dumpling and Zichen, we might be able to help them. Chu Luiyue didn't finish his sentence. She turned around and looked at the vast desert behind her. Where exactly was that eye hidden? Dugu Malbao returned to the dark and cramped cage. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao looked over. Rongxiu has already asked what you wanted to ask. Dugu Malbao said calmly. You heard Yuer's answer. From the beginning, he was not worried that she would find trouble with them because of this matter. Because she had always been extremely smart. Diwu Zhangzi sighed with a complicated expression and said emotionally, I really didn't dote on her for nothing. Dumpling and Zichen were very important to her. Now that they were suddenly missing, one could imagine the worry and anxiety in her heart. In comparison, Dugu Malbao's words seemed a little unreasonable. But fortunately, that girl was very open-minded about these things. The Red Moon Desert won't be peaceful for a period of time. I've already told her that we won't interfere. You mean no matter what happens in the future we'll just watch from here? Lan Xiao asked. Dugu Malbao looked at him expressionlessly. Other than watching, what else can you do now? In his current state, even if it was the day of the Red Moon, he wouldn't have the strength to go out. Lan Xiao choked. He wanted to defend himself, but Dugu Malbao was speaking the truth. He really couldn't think of anything to refute him. In the end, he could only harumph fiercely. When my divine body is reconstructed, I'll come out and fight with you. Dugu Malbao sat down. With a move of his palm, a Xian formation appeared in front of him. This Xian formation was very different from ordinary Xian formations. There was an unusually bright light spot on it. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao were stunned when they saw his actions. Big Bao, what are you doing? Diwu Zhangzi subconsciously straightened his body. His expression was solemn as he lowered his voice and asked. Dugu Malbao said calmly, Of course I'm opening the gate realm. You're crazy. Lan Xiao suddenly sat up. Because of the shock, his half-recovered face looked a little ferocious. The Red Moon Desert and the Divine Ruins world are connected by a door realm. That door realm is also an extremely secret place. You're opening the door realm now to attract those people from the Divine Ruins world? Dugu Malbao said, As long as we don't go out, they have no reason to come in. Lan Xiao choked. Although that was the case, these door realms had never been opened for many years. Even when they sent Yuer to the Divine Ruins world, they took a detour and went through Peach Blossom Cove. But now, you want to attract other people from the Divine Ruins world? Diwu Zhangzi suddenly realized something and asked in surprise. Dugu Malbao nodded. Of course, she's not a match for that thing alone. Even if Rongxiu is here, it won't be easy to deal with it. If more people come to help, maybe we'll have a better chance of winning. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao looked at each other and were silent for a long time. Dugu Malbao's actions were equivalent to directly exposing them to danger. And all of this was for Yuer. Although he said that he wasn't willing to help, he actually made such a decision secretly. Since you've already decided, we naturally have no objections. Diwu Zhangzi nodded and sighed again. I only hope that all these things can be resolved before the next dangerous month. Lan Xiao suddenly turned around and closed his eyes. A ball of fire jumped in his palm. Diwu Zhangzi asked curiously, Lan Xiao, what are you doing? Lan Xiao didn't even open his eyes and only snorted softly. Naturally, I'm reconstructing the divine body. Dugu Malbao isn't the only one who can help you. This time we have to succeed no matter what. Dugu Malbao glanced at him, then quickly retracted his gaze and looked at the Xian formation in front of him. For a long time this door realm had never been opened. But this time he couldn't care so much. A faint glow shone on his face, making his purple eyes look even more demonic. Then he raised his hand and lightly tapped on the Xian formation. Bang! A faint sound came from the Xian formation. That spot of light quickly spread out. At the same time, the divine ruins world shook. Wonderful book house.